Commissioner Berman.
Present.
Vice Chair Ferguson.
Present.
Commissioner Godwin.
Present.
Chair Hauser.
Present.
Commissioner Redfield.
Present.
Commissioner Wright.
Here.
Vice Chair Ferguson, would you lead us in the salute to the flag?
Of course.
All right. So we have a big agenda tonight. And so before we get into administrative business, any member of the public wishing to make public comment on any item should complete a speaker card and bring it to the front and hand it to staff. On the card, please indicate the agenda item number on which you wish to comment or oral communications for items not on the agenda. Today, we're going to have for all items oral communications, item 2, which is the public hearing, and item 3, 90 seconds in which to do public comment to make sure that we actually get to every single person today. Members of the public may also participate in the meeting via Zoom. There's a dial-in option for making public comment. The phone number is 669-900-6833. Once dialed in, enter conference number 811-5615-8241, and then press the pound key. Once the chair has announced the public comment opportunity for the item on which you wish to comment, press star 9 to raise your hand if dialing by phone, or the raised hand function in Zoom. City staff will then identify you by your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. If dialing in once identified for your turn to speak, press star 6 to unmute yourself, wait a few seconds, and then begin speaking. Be sure to mute any other broadcast you may be watching, such as Channel 26 or the live stream. And the dial-in instructions, which are shown on the screen, will be shown whenever there's an opportunity for public comment. Public meetings are a limited public forum, meaning that there are rules for commenting at these meetings. Comments on non-agendized items must address matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission, and comments on agendized items must relate to that specific items. If comments do not fall into one of these categories, the city will provide you with an initial warning to stay within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city or on topic. If the warning is not followed, I will direct the city clerk to cut off the microphone, and throughout this warning system, I will seek the assistance of the city attorney in identifying comments not related to the agenda item or not within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. I think a lot of people are probably here for item 3, which is the quarry. And when we get to that item, because again, we have other items on the agenda, when we get to that item, I will specifically go through the process for how that item works, the order in which we'll do things, and when public comment will occur. So with that, I don't have any comment cards on administrative business, which is the order of agenda, meeting minutes, etc. If anyone wishes to comment on administrative business, please bring a speaker card or raise your hand. Do we have any raised hands for administrative business only?
We have no raised hands at this time.
Okay. We have, so with that being said, I'll close public comment on administrative business, and I'll move to the order of the agenda. Does anyone have a motion for the order of the agenda? Yes, oral communications will be after administrative business. Nope, no problem at all. It's really complicated. There's going to be a lot of questions.
I move we approve the order of agenda as noted.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Something wrong with my button.
Okay, I think we're having technical issues since the commissioners mentioned there were issues with their button, so let's please revote.
And that motion passes unanimously. 6 votes in favor, none opposed.
Okay, thank you. We do not have any minutes tonight. We do have designation of liaison. We did this 2 meetings ago, I believe. for the meeting of City Council next week, in which our annual report is to be presented. Commissioner Berman, Commissioner Wright, and Commissioner Godwin, are you still available for Monday next week?
Yes, I'm available.
I am available.
Yes, I'll also be available.
All right, thank you. And I believe Commissioner Devine may participate remotely, and staff can coordinate with her. All right, so with that, we'll move from administrative business to oral communications. I do have a couple of comment cards for oral communications. This portion of agenda is available to the public to address the Planning Commission on any item within our subject matter jurisdiction. For items that are not on the agenda, the time allowed tonight, as I mentioned, will be 90 seconds. I have 2 cards, so if you have something you'd like to add, please bring it up. We'll start with Cliff Lawrence, followed by Ron, I believe it says Maycool. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Hey, Cliff.
Good evening. My name's Cliff Lawrence. Again, I want to thank you all for all you do. Tonight, I wanted to raise a question and a point. I want to ask, what is our form of municipal governance? Is it strong mayor or strong city manager? Does the Planning Commission understand that you have a mandate to make whatever recommendation and approval after your due diligence that is your scope, and that's what we've asked you to do? And that's what we expect, and we know you'll do it, and I thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ron.
Okay, my name's Ron Meikle. Good evening, Chair
Good evening.
and Commissioners. I have some handouts here, if you don't mind. I'd like to give them to you, and what it is, basically, well, there's a few things here, but this is, you may or may not know, this month, May, is the month of National Parks Day in Pacifica. I say that because it was
Please hand them to staff.
4 years ago today that Sweeney Ridge was included into the GGR. 1,000 acres, great, that's a wonderful place up there. And a lot of people presided over that particular thing, and what you have there, you have the sheet that shows you the dedication information there for that day, and you're going to see some familiar names in there. Also, in addition to that, you have a sheet about a group called PUSH, one of our first grassroots. Oh, I'm sorry. You also have a sheet there about PUSH, one of our first grassroots open space and land use preservation committees, groups. Anyway, that was one of put on by a group of people. But the person I really want to highlight here is Ferd Simons, who was a member of PUSH, and he was really astronomical and a major player in the Sweeney Ridge going into the Golden Gate Natural Recreation Area. And I just wanted to give you those 3 sheets. The other one gives you a little information, a bio on Ferd Simons. But look at that. I think you'll enjoy this old history. Some of it took place before some of you were born. But well, how much time have I got left?
I believe that's it.
That it? Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I think that's enough said anyway. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have another speaker card from Pete Shoemaker. Pete? Hey, Pete.
Yes, thank you. I think I can make a general comment that may help on just this and all other processes. Everybody here has been on a jury, and in juries, it's remarkable that people of all different types, different ages, different ethnicities, different political things, all work together very successfully to make very difficult decisions and important decisions. And the reason they do that is evidence with a capital E. Once they agree on what's true, what's real, the solutions almost fall out themselves. So when you have a common understanding of what's going on, what's real, what's really happening, it's easy to have consensus. But if you don't, it's almost impossible. So it's really important when you have a stuck situation like we probably have here. I don't look into who's bad people or who's wrong people. People are all generally about the same. You look for where the facts are unclear. And if you can get the truth, exactly what's happening, making it clear, the solutions and the problem solutions will come out very easily. So please focus on evidence like your jury to get the truth, gets us going on, and I think we can come to consensus and work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pete. That's everything I have for oral communications. I was handed an envelope that said Chair with something from the Coastal Commission. I don't think this is the same thing everyone else got. Was this given?
That came in from one of the commenters on Maury Point, or Sweeney Ridge, rather.
Ah, okay. All right, I have something from the Coastal Commission that I will dive into later. All right, so with that, I will go to Zoom and the telephones. Again, public comment information for dial-in and Zoom is on the screen. If you have a comment and you're dialed in, please press *9 to raise your hand.
There are no raised hands at this
For
time.
oral communications, okay. With that, I will close oral communications. And we will move on to consent items. I don't believe we need a staff report for this. Does anyone want to pull CDP-449-23 from the agenda, or can we get a motion for the consent calendar? Oh, I'm sorry. I need to open public comment on the consent calendar. I don't have any speaker cards for the consent calendar, so if a member of the public would like to pull an item from the consent calendar, please bring in a speaker card or raise your hand on Zoom or by phone.
There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay. We're out of speaker cards. That is very easily rectified. Please give us one moment.
I accidentally got this yellow thing that says, please speak into the microphone. I wish I saw this when I came up there.
Yes, so a reminder to please speak into the microphone so that everyone can hear you, including the people watching on Zoom, listening on their phone, or on YouTube. So being that we didn't have speaker cards, I'm going to give folks 10 more seconds to indicate if they would like to pull item 1 from the consent calendar. Still no raised hands?
We have one raised hand.
Okay.
Ron, you may unmute yourself.
Is this a comment on the quarry right now?
No, it is not. That is item
Oh.
3, and we'll get there shortly.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry about that. I was surprised by nobody raised their hand.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. Anyone else on Zoom? Okay. With that, I'm going to close oral communications on the consent calendar. Now, would somebody like to make a motion on the consent calendar?
Chair Hauser, we have one more raised hand. Oh, never mind. They removed their hand.
Okay.
I move we receive and file the report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please vote.
That motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. And that brings us to continued public hearings. This is the Olympian gas station. This is not yet the quarry. The quarry is item 3. So this is CDP-431-21, TP-7-24, coastal development permit and tree permit for demolition of a soil remediation system at the former Olympian gas station. May we have a staff report, please?
Union Chair, Contract Planner Jacob Garcia will deliver the staff report this evening.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jake Garcia. I'm a contract planner for the City of Pacifica. The project before you this evening involves the demolition of a soil remediation system at the former Olympian gas station in the West Sharp Park neighborhood at 1518 Francisco Boulevard. The proposed project requires Planning Commission review because the project site is located in the appeal jurisdiction of the coastal zone. In this area, reconstruction, demolition, or alteration of the size of any structure, including any facility of any private, public, or municipal utility, trigger the requirement for review and approval of a coastal development permit. The project also requires Planning Commission approval of a tree permit because the project proposes encroachment of construction activity within 50 feet of a protected tree. On your screen, I'll take you through the project details. Starting first with the site plan. The lot is irregular in shape, where the bulk of the property is located along Francisco Boulevard, and a small portion of the lot extends out to Paloma Avenue from the rear of the larger portion of the property. This smaller portion of the property that fronts Paloma Avenue is where the proposed project is located. This lot was the former site of the Olympian service station, and the larger portion of the property is now occupied by an auto repair shop and towing company. Historically, a dual-phase extraction, or a DPE system, operated from 2006 to 2011 at the former Olympian or the Olympian service station to remove residual gasoline hydrocarbons from beneath the former gasoline service station. The DPE system consisted of a groundwater extraction and treatment system and a soil vapor extraction system. A majority of the groundwater extraction system was removed from the project site in March of 2009, leaving 2 concrete and steel equipment pads and a temporary power pole. Here's another more focused site plan on the area of the proposed work. This is the side of the property that fronts Paloma Avenue. The applicant proposes to demolish the existing remaining soil remediation system, which would include the demolition of a 10-foot by 18-foot concrete pad with a steel plate that is 10 inches deep. This is labeled as pad 1 or referenced as pad 1. A 10-foot by 3-foot concrete pad that is 10 inches deep and is referenced as pad number 2. A temporary 16-foot wooden power pole that is no longer used. And the on-site below-ground conveyance piping and electrical conduits near the concrete pads are to be cut 6 inches below grade and have their contents removed and secured with a permanent waterproof cap. Additionally, all remedial groundwater and electrical conveyance lines exiting the site into the city right-of-way would be cut at the property line and secured with waterproof caps. There's a former sewer discharge connection pad that will be cut and capped also near the property line near Paloma Avenue. The areas that would be disturbed by the removal of the concrete pads and the temporary power pole will be filled with crushed rock. The project anticipates approximately 1 2/3 cubic yards of fill to repair the grade of the space of the demolished pads and temporary pole. Small areas where asphalt removal is necessary to cut and cap non-operational service lines would be restored using cold patch asphalt. This site plan also shows the location of protected trees in red. There are 4 existing Monterey cypress trees identified on the adjacent property on Paloma Avenue and are located within 50 feet of the proposed scope of work, all of which are considered protected trees by the city's municipal code. An arborist report, including a tree protection and preservation plan, has been prepared and reviewed by the city arborist for conformance with the city's requirements. There are no anticipated impacts on the protected trees or their roots as a result of this proposed project. The applicant also proposes to demolish 3 extraction wells located in the public right-of-way along Paloma Avenue in front of the project site and to the west along Palmetto Avenue and Carmel Avenue. The locations of the extraction wells are shown here on your screen in red again. And the applicant proposes to cut and cap the off-site piping at these locations to remove the extraction monitoring well locations, and it would be done by one of 2 methods, either pressure grouting or alternatively it would be done by overdrilling as allowed by the county health department. And the description of both of those methodologies are included as an attachment to the staff report. An encroachment permit must be obtained for all work within the public right-of-way. All proposed improvements within the public right-of-way shall be constructed per the city standards. And no public comments have been received after publication of the staff report and in advance to tonight's meeting. And on your screen is the staff recommendation to approve the project with conditions as explained within the staff report. This is the end of the staff presentation. If you have any questions, both city staff and the project applicant is available to answer them. And I yield back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Does the applicant have a presentation, or are they just here to answer questions?
I'm the applicant.
Yes. Hi.
In case you have any questions.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
And Chair, good evening, Commissioners, Planning Director Christian Murdoch. I just do want to clarify one minor point. Jake mentioned the project site's located in the appeals jurisdiction of the coastal zone. It's just a portion of the project. The 1518 Francisco site itself is not, but one of the extraction wells on Carmel and some of the piping associated with that is located in the appeals jurisdiction. So just to try to clarify that key point.
Would this come before us if no part of it was in the coastal zone?
I haven't done that analysis specifically since we surpassed that threshold for the overall project.
No problem. Does anyone have questions for the applicant or the staff?
I just had one question. This is a former gas station site, and usually those are required to be cleared
for future construction, and that remediation is complete. Is that correct?
Yes, the remediation is complete, and it's been signed off by the County Health Department, and it's currently used as an automotive repair facility, Simon's Automotive Repair.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, we will open for public comment. By way of reminder, folks, tonight will have 1.5 minutes for public comment if there are any. I do not have speaker cards on this item. I'm seeing, hi, Mr. Stuchnik. Is this for item 2, Mr. Woodhouse? Yes, okay, great. Dan, this is you're the only speaker card I have if you want to come.
Thank you very much. Is it 1:30 public comment?
Yes, thank you.
Wow, it's the shortest I've ever seen. I think I've seen 2 of these in the 27 counties that I've sat in on planning meetings before, and this one seems to be missing a lot of paperwork. This is a mitigation project. The reason those vent and inspection or measurement and evacuation wells are there are because you've got gasoline underground with groundwater migration. There's not a single word in this whole report about that. The report that they're referring to by the county seems to address remediation of water wells, filling water wells with grout, and not a evacuation and measurement well. Reason that well is these well heads are there to begin with are to measure there. Typically they're bookended. They know when they removed the SEV system in 2009 or 2011, they'd say, well, we're leaving these wells here for evacuation monitoring. We'll measure them this point, this point, this point. Typically they'll say at 10-year periods, it might say at 50 period. It might say for perpetuity. None of that is in there. You've got, this will be easy to bounce back at Coastal Commission, but what you should do is you should continue this until you have that information. You have the entire mitigation report to begin with, and
Thank you, Dan.
do this the right way. Don't poison that groundwater. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't have any other comment cards for item 2. Do we have any call-ins, raised hands?
We have 1 raised hand at this time. Fran, you may unmute yourself.
Okay. Do we want to try one more time? Is there only 1 raised hand?
Fran, you may unmute yourself.
Okay, Fran, we're getting some more comment cards. If these are for item 2, we'll come back to you, and if not, you can email your comments to planning staff. Mr. Murdoch, are these for item 2? No. No? Okay. Fran, we're going to give you one more try, and if not, you can email your comment. No? Okay. Would staff mind providing the email address to receive public comments? Is this for item 2?
Is that about the gas station?
Yes.
Auto Works?
Yes.
I respect everything that you do. It's not an easy job, and I only have a few seconds, and I'm a little upset right now. So I take my, how is this going to impact Simon's Auto Works? And please respect our oceans. Please don't make willy-nilly plans to get things pushed through so, you know, more development can come in, and just respect the ocean, please. Respect the environment. Do it the right way.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you. If you could please fill out a speaker card and hand it to staff after the fact, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, Chair Hauser, Stephanie Cervantes with the Planning Department. The public comment email address is publiccomment@pacifica.gov.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cervantes. So with that, I believe the applicant has time for, I think you have up to 3 minutes to speak to what you just heard.
I was just going to briefly say that the environmental cleanup of the residual gasoline in soil and groundwater was completed years ago and approved by the County Health Department. And what we're removing is just the remnants of the old equipment. The equipment's been gone for years. We just want to remove the 2 concrete pads that still exists and a temporary power pole, because our client's agreement with the property owner is to return that little strip of land to its original condition, which was a vacant lot. Our removing of those two concrete pads that no longer have anything to do with remediation, which, like I said, was dealt with years ago, simply fulfill that contract and get those things out of there, return that land to the property owner in its original form. The wells that were referred to, they're still remaining until the county gives us approval to remove them, and they're monitoring wells. So those right now are staying, but our future plan is to remove them.
Thank you for that clarification. If you wouldn't mind staying up, just in case folks have questions for you. Does anyone have questions for the applicant? I just have a couple myself. So it sounds like this remediation was monitored by DEH at the county with the GPP?
Correct.
And you have a closure letter from them, it sounds like, that was...
Not with me, but I can certainly send it to you.
Okay, has staff seen a copy of the closure letter? Has our city staff been provided that? I'm seeing nods, but I want to make... Yeah.
This was received in an earlier submittal for this, but was not
And
included as an attachment.
DEH issued a closure letter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So personally, if the county is...
I can pull it up on the state water board site and send a copy to anyone.
Well, it sounds like our staff planner, Mr. Garcia, has seen it and reviewed it. And so I'll open for deliberation, but I'm personally, this was not a self-directed remediation. This was a remediation with oversight. So I think I'm going to leave the comment closed, Dan. I'm sorry.
Can I have 30 seconds of rebuttal? The public has not seen that letter.
Okay. So does anyone have anything else to add or any deliberation? Okay. Mr. Garcia, because that letter was not part of the public packet, and it really should be, right? Like we do need the complete information. I would appreciate if that was made available to the public. And with that, I will entertain a motion.
Would the chair be amenable to continuing this to our next planning commission meeting so that that letter can be made available to the public?
I don't think it's I mean.
It's a little outside of our purview.
Right. So let me.
Chair Hauser, it's
yes.
important to reinforce that that letter is available to the public on the water board website. So we're not hiding anything. We didn't believe it was germane to the item at the Planning Commission, although the staff did verify the closure letter, was in our possession. So that's the reason. It wasn't an intent to hide any information, and it is publicly available on the water board's website.
Yeah, if it's posted on EnviroStore and DH has signed off and planning has reviewed it, I don't have a problem with approving this tonight. But again, I'm one of 7, so.
I'm happy to make a motion. I move that the Planning Commission finds the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act and approves coastal development permit CDP-431-21 and tree permit TP-7-24 by adopting the attached resolution, including conditions of approval in Exhibit A, and incorporates all maps and testimony of the record by reference.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let's please vote.
And that motion passes with 5 votes in favor and 1 opposed.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. So that now takes us to item 3, which is a consideration item RZ-210-22, DP-86-22, SP-179-22, UP-71-16, PV-531-22, TP-1-22, and final EIR, study session to discuss the proposed quarry reclamation plan at the former Rockaway Quarry and potential alternatives. And before we start into this item, because again, there are a lot of people here, and I want to make sure everybody understands the logistics of how this is going to run, I want to first note that this item is a study session, so there are no decisions that are going to be made on this project tonight. The The item is going to start with a staff presentation like what you just saw for item 2. I will then open public comment the way I just did for item 2 and go directly to the applicant for its presentation. So with that in mind, commissioners, I'm asking that we reserve questions for staff and the applicant until after the applicant's presentation. Following commission questions, members of the public will be allowed to speak for 1.5 minutes each. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker card. I have a big stack of them over here. I assume we're going to be getting some more. And provide it to staff, and you will be called to the podium when it is your turn to speak. I said this at the last meeting, but I want to make sure that people feel safe coming up to the podium to speak, whether they have the same ideas as you or different ideas as you. So in order to ensure a fair process and not intimidate anyone from speaking and keep the meeting and comments moving smoothly, I ask that we hold any applause or booing or yelling. You may express your opinion when you're called to come to the podium and address the commission. If there are disruptions similar to at our meeting in March, I will issue a reminder to the audience, and if disruptions continue, I'll recess the meeting. I totally understand that everybody feels very strongly about this, and I think we've heard that. So with that, I will ask staff to provide a staff report.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Stephanie Cervantes, Senior Planner in the Planning Division, and I will be giving a very brief staff presentation on the Rocky Way Quarry Reclamation Plan study session tonight. The entire site is roughly 86 acres, located on the west side of Coast Highway, just north of the Rockaway neighborhood, between Reina del Mar Avenue and Fassler Avenue. Calera Creek bisects the quarry parcel from the eastern parcel. The applicant had previously submitted a reclamation plan as required per the Pacifica Municipal Code and state law that was presented to the Planning Commission in June of 2023 and of March of this year. We are here tonight because the applicant has requested a study session in front of the Planning Commission. As a result, the prior public hearing that was scheduled for May 6th was canceled. The request by the applicant is to provide the Planning Commission an opportunity to discuss reclamation alternatives and to respond to prior commission questions. The objective of tonight's study session is to provide direction on whether the Planning Commission is interested in a reclamation plan that reduces fill by assuming future development at the quarry site, as determined by a specific plan process. Any future specific plan process at the quarry would be a city-led effort and would include extensive community engagement. That does conclude my portion of the presentation. However, staff is here to respond to any initial questions you may have, and the applicant is also prepared to address the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cervantes. So with that, I'm going to open the public hearing and ask the applicant if they have a presentation. I believe they have 10 minutes and they can reserve 3 minutes of it. I mean, it's a study session, so I'd like a little bit of direction on.
So it would be appropriate to be consistent as public hearings with 10 minutes for a presentation and then follow-up questions, as you noted earlier.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And Chair, it's my understanding the applicant does not have an initial presentation. They do have some reference materials if they're needed in the course of discussion, so I think they wanted to make themselves available for a dialogue or Q&A with the commission. So perhaps that's another way to use the initial 10 minutes to begin any question and answer.
Okay. Well, considering the applicant asked for a study session, I'd like to know what they'd like us to study.
Well, I'd like to make a few comments, if I may.
Please.
Okay. So my name is Paul Hule, and I'm the owner of the Quarry, and our company develops across the United States and also in the Netherlands. I was born and raised near Amsterdam, and currently my primary residence is in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Specifically, we've owned projects in California very successfully, but I'm not a typical developer that flies in, does his development, and leaves. We are a multi-generational investor that has a very, very long-term view of our projects and are committed to those projects. And I think we've shown that by going through the process quite meticulously here. I grew up among buildings in Amsterdam that, despite being built on a swamp and some of them on cowhides as foundations, withstood the centuries and took centuries to build, and we believe in that philosophy. So I'm here for the long term and hope to be able to work with the community and find our differences and come to a consensus. I mean, the Dutch even have a word for this. It's called poldering, which when you fill in a piece of sea, everybody kind of has to agree on that. So that's how the Dutch got to that point. So I want to go back quickly to 2016, after we gave a plan for the development. Timing was obviously very tight at that point, and we focused on a development plan and had the referendum, which ended up not getting approved, as you guys all know. And that was actually really not by a huge margin, frankly. But from there on, we had to pivot, because I told the people back then, as I do now, that I am not going to leave this quarry the way it is today, where people literally died, where people have gone critically injured, and where native plants are also being taken over by invasive species. So, being true to my word, after the ballot failed, our sole focus was bringing on the quarry back in compliance with SMARA, which the previous owners have failed to do over the last 30 plus years. And I'm sure that's very annoying to you and to the public that this wasn't dealt with right from the start, but we can't really change that. And so the plan that we put before you was and is consistent with SMARA, and for the last 10 years, I've had a big letter of credit out there to make sure that I comply with that law. And so that's where we're at. So we submitted this plan originally that had over 870 actually 1 million cubic yards, and then later on reduced that down by 10% to 870 cubic yards. And that was a result of thousands and thousands of hours of very skilled people hired by the city to make sure that this was done properly. And I am not an expert in all these individual fields, but certainly I hope that all of us believe those people have worked in good faith. Now, you've recently seen a submitted letter stating that if future uses in the general plan were realized, the amount of dirt could be minimized further, right? Reduced further. And that's certainly a discussion I'm willing to have, and it makes sense, right? I mean, if you have a building pad, and if you just look at purely reclaiming and doing nothing further with the land, because everything was voted down, nobody wanted anything with the land, despite of what your use plan states, nobody wants anything there. So then you need to focus on filling it all in with dirt. But if you end up having certain portions that, for basements and other things that would be constructed, obviously that requires less dirt. So there's a logic to that. And I also just want to be clear from a developer standpoint, I'm not a dirt guy. Dirt costs money, right? And it also, if it takes 5 years or 3 years to do something, or 2 years, from a developer standpoint, it's way more advantageous to have something take shorter than longer. I mean, the compounding cost of capital There is a logical incentive for us not to do more than we have to on the dirt aspect. That's not my business. So, I also want to put in perspective that all the traffic, which is bad, and I want to not discredit that. I mean, the report I read said, there was a daily traffic increase of 0.3%. And when I met with one of the Coastal Committee staff, they said to me, well, I showed them the reclamation plan, this a number of years ago, and she said to me, well, sometimes in order to get an omelet, you have to break eggs. And I am absolutely not stating that this is not a discomfort for people. I cannot obviously deny that at all, but we need to get through this part together. And if we can do it together, collaboratively, with community involvement, then I'm all for that. And if we can't do that, then I'm just going to have to follow the law and do what I'm told to do. And people can get very angry with me on that, but it's mandated, and I'm committed to do that. I do want to give a quick example, because I got a few more minutes here, about a project that I did in the Netherlands that I'm working on specifically, and that shows some of the collaborative work that we've done. It's actually interesting. It's a community outside The Hague, and it's kind of like here in Pacifica, where you've got SMARA, which you really cannot, overrule as a local community. In the Netherlands, you've got sound walls that need to be put in. If your noise level is a certain level, you're required to put in these concrete walls, and everybody hates these concrete walls. I'm sure those of you that travel to Europe have seen all these walls everywhere. Well, that's a country-mandated thing. So what we ended up doing to this, proposing this community, and I'll show it here to you, is we actually worked with the community to look at what some of the old walls from long ago looked like, to kind of mimic those and make it look attractive on the outside. And then also help with the housing element that they have, is because in that neighborhood there, housing is very expensive and very difficult to obtain. So we actually built housing inside of the proposals to build the housing inside of the retaining walls that also take care of the sound. So the community gets affordable housing, which is much needed, and at the same time also deals with a compliance issue in a more attractive way. So it's a collaborative example project. I'll show it here for you. You guys can just take a peek at it. But it shows a little bit that we are willing to think outside the box, willing to do something that can be a win-win for everybody. But at the same time, we're also here just committed to saying we are going to follow the process of the law. And if that takes, been at this for 10 years, if it takes another 20 years, then, so be it. But we're going to meticulously go step by step to do what we're mandated to do, because I'm not leaving the quarry the way it is today, but I would love to do something beautiful. Let me start.
Sure, thank you.
Are there any questions about me that you would like me to answer?
I think now would be a great time for questions for, is it Hule?
Hule, yes.
Okay, Mr. Hule. And we can start and go down. Or Commissioner Wright, if you would like to start.
I'd just like to hear a little bit more about what some of the other types of projects that you do. Are you primarily a residential developer, a commercial developer? What is your primary focus?
My primary focus is all different types of multifamily. I've done extensive affordable housing projects, as well as very high-end housing. In addition to that, we've also done a fair bit of land development, conservation easements, done a number of conservation easements in those developments with a focus on sustainability.
I didn't hear much about any kind of commercial development, no hotels.
No, so
no
generally speaking,
high-rises.
no. I would say if you look at, we do have a number of hotels and retail in our portfolio, but I would say probably 80% of our portfolio probably involves a residential element and 20% involve commercial.
Thank you.
Is that it for you, Commissioner Wright, for now? Commissioner Redfield? Commissioner Godwin?
Yeah, I've got a few. I guess my first one is I was impressed with your letter that the amount of fill was being reduced in the reclamation and development plan. I thought that was a good thing. The reason I think that way is I think delivering fill by dump truck trips are potentially dangerous. I would like to see an additional evolution of your plan that reduces the amount of fill to less than, say, 167,000 cubic yards or so, say 10 or 12,000 dump truck trips. Is that something you could consider as part of the reclamation and development plan?
Well, I think what that would be, I mean, I cannot pick out a arbitrary number out of the air, right? Because we have very specific rules that we need to abide by the state. The only thing I can tell you is that for me to further reduce the fill, if it's feasible, right? Is for me an interesting thing to try to pursue together if the site were to be developed. At this point, I'm assuming there will be no development. But if there would be a pivot and the city says, well, we want to look at that, then like I said, I mean, if you just think about basements or whatever garage spaces that you think of, right? That could be subsurface. If you put a subsurface garage in there, I mean, you don't need dirt because there's a garage, right? So there's a very logical way of dealing with that, and because the hole is already there, you don't have to dig the dirt out, otherwise you end up digging the dirt out. So it's a very long-winded answer to saying I think we would. There has to be some trust there, but there's also an economic incentive for me to try to reduce it.
Makes sense.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this revised plan that includes some development. I'd really like to get a more concrete view of what that looks like from what you're proposing. Do you have any kind of time frame in which that would become available?
So I think...
As at least the initial version of it?
Well, I want to be careful here what we're saying, because that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that, we don't want to take another 6 years to make another plan. What I'm suggesting is saying that we will go ahead and agree on a reclamation plan while simultaneously engaging the community as what they would like to see there. And as we work on the reclamation, because the reclamation is not like, in one day you're going to have 300,000 yards of dirt there, right? I mean, it's going to, just to ramp up, it's going to take time. So if we work together with the community, get some city hall type meetings going to see what people want, get them involved, and then come to a consensus what we can do feasibly while we start filling that quarry up. And then once we have the plan, we just go ahead saying, well, this is how much dirt we actually need. So that's the way I see it. I'm not seeing it as, let's pivot to a brand new plan.
Okay, my next question is, I think having dump trucks decelerate when exiting off California 1 might again cause some accidents. Are you willing to consider having the trucks enter and exit at the current Rena Del Mar light and do them in batches, much like militaries run railroads or damage roads?
I can't answer that. That's not my expertise. That's probably something you need to answer, right, Billy?
Sure. I'm just going to repeat the question back to you to make sure I understood it correctly. The proposal is to have trucks come in and leave in batches, or is it just to leave in batches and only from Reina Del Mar? Did I understand your question correctly?
Correct. I mean, just like roads are run during construction, or the military maximizes the output of a railroad by saying, hey, we're moving all this way now, then we're stopping moving that way and moving the opposite way in the next time frame.
Absolutely. So with respect to trucks coming in, I don't believe that we're anticipating the trucks coming in from Reina Del Mar, but from the previous or old entrance off of Highway 1. As trucks leave the site, we actually, in our plan, have a flagger that's positioned at the fence next to the parking lot there. And pacing truck exits in blocks, so as long as we can do it in accordance with the lights, I think that's perfectly reasonable and something that we expect to do. And I think it's also just important to remind everybody that we will not have trucks be leaving the site during the time of school drop-off. So no matter what, no trucks would leave the site, until after school drop-off has been completed.
Anything else, Commissioner Godwin?
Got one more. Okay. One of the members of the public brought up that the steepest part of the site is the ocean-facing bluffs at the ocean. And there's been some attempts to fill those in the past, they asserted, and some of that fill is failing. Have you thought about that, and do you have some plan for that part of the site?
I think, Matt, that's something that you would need to answer.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Matt Walsh, Civil Engineer. So currently, the reclamation plan, in accordance with SMARA, is just reclaiming the mined areas of the site. I think the steep bluff side, ocean side portion of the site is probably more likely due to wave run-up erosion. So our particular plan does not address that.
Okay, I'm finished.
Okay, Vice Chair?
Yeah, I think there's been a perception that not enough of the community has been able to be heard, so I'd like to reserve most of my comments for after public comment. But I just wanted to get a clarification on the presentation that we just received. I think we as commissioners can appreciate that SMARA is the law and some kind of reclamation will take place. It has to for the quarry. That's been litigated and that subject is closed. Unclear what that will be. But it seems like, I guess I can also appreciate that there's been a site-specific plan as a goal for the city council for the last 6 or 8 years. I can't speak to why that's taking 6 or 8 years or when that will happen. But I understand that it's been on the list of priorities and hasn't happened yet. So is it my understanding that the goal of this study group, which was asked for by the applicant, is to come up with some kind of a reasonable middle ground to approve with the anticipation that a site-specific plan will later deviate from that reclamation plan?
Also, my thing would be to have the specific plan, be the plan that we come up collectively with a goal of have reduced fill going into the plan. The latest plan that we looked at, the 500 some, is already significant. Well, significantly, it's an acre less, right, than what the specific plan had? So it's 2.5 acres less already as what the specific plan calls for over there. So, so that's I guess, short answer is yes. We would work together not in a 6-year fashion, hopefully, but in a few years to really help put the resources behind that to get the engagement, come up with a plan, and try to get it done.
Sure, I think it was Commissioner Berman's first comment at our first meeting that we all would have liked to see the site-specific plan first and the reclamation plan second, or a part of one thing, but I appreciate that that's where we are, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Commissioner Berman?
Thank you. First off, I really appreciate you being here, Mr. Huell. Is that?
Yeah, correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. It's nice to have this forum together and an opportunity to get to know you and ask our questions of you. For, I guess, overarching tonight's study session, we're considering partnering the reclamation plan with a specific plan. And I know the specific plan process is a process where we could collaboratively work together, city, planning commission, city council, yourself, as well as the community. Do you mind speaking to what you plan for community engagement if we were to pursue this specific plan process, and even some past community engagement that you've had on past projects? Kind of what do you visualize with this new path forward we're considering?
Well, what I would suggest is that we actually collectively retain a person that specializes in involving community engagement, that is to the satisfaction of the city of Pacifica and us, and have them actually lead that process, because it's a very specialized skill to make sure that you get everybody heard and not just a very small part of the community gets heard, and also very easy for it to get dragged on very long. And so the idea there would be then to have a number of those town hall meetings where people, you get together. I'm sure you've seen it before, where you have the round tables, everybody gets together and brainstorms. And then out of these brainstorm meetings come ideas, and then you narrow it down to 2 or 3 different plans, and then you finally end up with a final plan that hopefully has nobody 100% happy, but everybody can live with it, right? And that's something that's kind of fair. And so I think that's a way I see it happen. I can tell you a most recent example that I did, and it's fresh off the press, so to speak. It was just done. There was a community where the piece of parcel that we owned was zoned for a modular home community. And the community was not excited about getting modular housing in that particular location. And so what we agreed together with the community to do is saying we actually took half the property, and we did a conservation easement over it, and set the difference between what the value would be as a mobile home community versus just a much lighter density. And so, we ended up saying, all right, we will take a donation part of the conservation easement. We don't make as much money as we would, but at the same time, the community's happy with just having a nice conservation easement and smaller development. Another project we did was in the city of Saugatuck, which is an affluent community on Lake Michigan. It had a 137-acre parcel. And we did the same thing there. We worked with the community. We worked on some paths and through the community, like what we're contemplating here, to the beach. And again, also had a significant portion that we preserved for nature, like what we would be proposing here as well. So I think those are some specific examples, concrete examples that we've done and we've worked with the community. And in particular, the Saugatuck example, you can actually, I can show you, there's another developer who said this my way or the highway, and that movie didn't end really well, and we actually have a project that everybody is happy with. So I understand the benefit of working together, and frankly, life is too short to fight all the time. I'm just getting kind of sick of it, so I'd rather make love than make war,
So, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, let's be respectful, please, and we'll do the same for everyone in the room.
Chair,
Do you have any more?
Chair, if I could just briefly, Planning Director Christian Murdoch, So we're talking about a specific plan process. I want to clarify. As this approach is being envisioned, it is a city-led specific planning process with extensive community engagement, multiple community touch points and meetings, online engagement opportunities, along the lines of prior planning processes like the Sharp Park specific plan, for example. Certainly, Mr. Huell can undertake additional engagement with the community to whatever extent he finds helpful and appropriate. But this concept of the reclamation plan process concluding through the hearing stages and then shifting into a specific plan process envisions a city-led process with the community, the owner, and all of the relevant stakeholders participating in that in a public fashion.
Does anyone have any questions before I turn to mine? Go ahead.
I do appreciate you being here, and I do appreciate what I think I am hearing. What I'm hearing is a cooperative work together, listen to community input, listen to our input, all work together to try to find something that will work for everybody. That's what I think I'm hearing from you. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I think you're correct, yeah.
I'm very pleased to hear that. Just a flitting thought that was in my mind, and I think about things like visitor serving, recreational stuff, and I hear you talking about walls, and I hear you talking about less fill opportunities, and I think about retaining walls with climbing pegs on it, and make it a climbing wall instead of a retaining wall, similar to something that you did.
Fun idea, actually, yeah.
So those are some of the things that I think about. But I'd like to hear a little bit about how, in the time that you've owned the land, how it is that you came to the decision of how to reclaim the mine and why you chose the contractors you chose as like a soil contractor as opposed to a grading contractor or somebody that's specifically a mine reclaimer.
Well, I'll take these two pieces. So first of all, how did I come to the reclamation? Well, I come to the reclamation is because every year, when we purchased the property, I was required to post a letter of credit. It's I think $1.6 or $7 million. But saying, hey, you need to do that, and every year we needed to renew that, and so I knew that had to be done, right? So that I didn't really have a choice in. As to the urgency of the matter, when people start literally dying on a site, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
Hey, guys,
We had-
I don't want to call a recess. Let's have an expeditious, smooth meeting.
So I mean, and it becomes an issue that of a life safety issue that I also have a responsibility of doing something about quickly, and try to do it expeditiously. And so when the development plan was voted down, I automatically pivoted, like I said in my comments, to develop it. I met Billy. It was actually a kind of a coincidental situation how we ran into each other. And I have no expertise in filling dirt. I don't. That's not my expertise. His expertise, and he has a long track record. He has a number of different quarries that were filled in. And so since he had the expertise and I did not, and he lives in San Francisco and I don't, it made a lot of sense to ask him to do this work for me. And so that's how that came about.
Okay. I'm gonna go and then I'll. Commissioner Redfield, you can go and then I'll go.
Again, I'd like to reiterate, thank you very much for being here. As you can see, this is a very engaged community.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
So we appreciate your showing up. And I think this is a great idea. Really appreciate the fact that you're looking to work with the city, work with the community to hopefully please everybody. I think the original get-go of the 870, whatever it was, the 9,000 cubic yards, 900,000 cubic yards was excessive. It wasn't gonna fly. This seems to be a very workable idea to come forward, and that's what we're looking for, is ideas. We're looking for thoughtful process to get this done. It must be done, as you stated, it should have been done many years ago, and it wasn't. And here we are, and there's nothing we can, this is where we're at to take care of that issue. Must be done, but we also need certain things that, the housing element and whatnot. So development is very limited, but access to the trails are key. Sure. That's a community love. It's a regional love. To keep that and return that, again, remove those 29 invasive species out of the property would be exceptional. So we appreciate your thoughtful working with the city, and hopefully we can work this and make it work for everyone. That's the goal.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to repeat certain things that I said at the last couple of meetings. And I agree that there's an obligation to keep people safe. And I agree that the site needs to be reclaimed in a way that does that. But what I said at the last meeting was that it's not the job of the city to make this economically feasible, because the economics for this mine were the 200 years of it being a mine, right? The reclamation is an obligation. And I think we can all agree on that. It's very factual. What I like about what you've said is that it does have a very large community engagement perspective, right? I am also in development, and I go through very thorough community process with lots of community meetings. But I'm there personally, right? And it's different, right? I live in Pacifica. I do stuff in the Bay Area. I get it. I think I have a few questions on the community portion of this. The first one is, I want to understand why there wasn't a thorough community process done before. And then, as like a two-parter here, I want to understand what's going to be different going forward. Because I can tell from the way you're talking about your projects that you do thorough community engagement. But you have to understand it doesn't feel like that on this project thus far.
So I think when you look at the original, and we went through the original ballot proposal, we had a very light development, and we actually had some community meetings, but we had a very limited time, because by the time that we finally ended up closing on this parcel, and you can appreciate as a developer that you always think that things happened quickly, and then there were like slews of title issues and everything else, so that really shortened our timeline in terms of how much time we had really to put something together in order to meet all the ballot initiatives, and it took for a long time to actually get all the signatures and stuff like that. So we ended up trying to do that to the point that we had an entire model made. I don't know if you ever saw that or not, but we had a big scale model that we had on display at two different locations here. And but you're right that we obviously didn't do it right, because we ended up getting spanked by the community, right? So because we weren't successful, right? And so I think coming from that, I guess I would think that it's reasonable to assume that we're going to do whatever we can not to end up in that same predicament again.
Sure.
Because again, Phil, like you said, I mean, it's an obligation I have. I need to do it, and but that's not where I have my passion,
Of course.
I'm not a dirt guy.
I wholly understand that. And I also, I don't want to conflate the reclamation plan and Measure W, because I did, there were a lot of outreach items that happened when you were going through Measure W, and I understand that it failed, but there was outreach. Here, it feels like there hasn't been outreach on this different plan with a different operator, and it feels like the numbers are arbitrary, because it's $1 million and then 5, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I think I can give a small answer to it. The outreach, I felt I was just following the law, and shame on me. I thought, well, we're just following the law, right? I mean, we're doing what we're supposed to do. I didn't think that we need to have an outreach situation when we're just following the law and doing what we need to do. The large quantity of dirt initially basically came from a worst case scenario, right? I mean, it was, regardless of what the specific plan states on paper, I mean, the fact that we have all these people here talking potentially, against what we're trying to do was pretty clear that people don't want any development there, right? And so the message there was fairly clear. So I said, well, if that's what Pacifica wants, then we're just going to fill the bowl and turn this back to what it was, right? And that's what the mandate says. And SMARA is very, very specific in what you want, what you need to do there. Then we did some fine tuning, because we had the worst case scenario and tried to reduce that, to try to saying how, and Matt, calculated the stuff out and slopes and stuff, and do stuff that's very specific to try to fine tune it, because there was some pushback. And then we had this discussion saying, well, hey, what if there is a building path as the specific plan contemplates? And that's when you can actually get to a point that you have like an intermediate solution that you can have some flexibility with, also under the SMARA law. But it needs to. So I think that's how it came about. But yeah, you're right. In retrospect, we probably should have, if you could. Life doesn't have a rehearsal dinner,
Yeah.
And you go straight to the wedding. And so the fact is, if we're, would we do that? You're absolutely right. We probably should have gotten more feedback, talked more with you guys, and I didn't think this was going to be a big problem, because we're just told it was just to be a requirement.
I would like to be able to hear the answer.
Yeah. So
I wholly agree on the life doesn't have a rehearsal dinner. I almost wonder if this could be the rehearsal dinner, because I think if you've listened to, and they're long, right? But if you listen to the 10 to 12 hours of hearings that we've had on this, you probably would have heard a lot of folks in the community say the reclamation makes sense when paired with a development plan. And what I love about tonight is that you asked for a study session, right? This is a good first step. I wonder if instead of trying to, it sounds like what Mr. Murdoch, you were saying was, the thought here is that we would still be filling the quarry pit while going through a development plan process. To me, it doesn't seem to make sense to do a development plan after the reclamation. Those two things seem to be intrinsically tied. And so I wonder if this could be the rehearsal dinner for that process. What do you think?
I think it'd be problematic, because the reason why I think that's problematic is because if you tie the two together, you end up starting completely from scratch. And we've taken, 6 years, 2018, to when we started this original reclamation plan. And I think we try to fully comply with all the requirements we have. And so I think the only way to get this done is to say, all right, well, we all agree we need to do reclamation. I mean, there could be, I think there could be a hybrid version of that there be some, and I know, and I got to be careful how I articulate this, because I know how bits and pieces of words are being used. Sure. So I got to be a little careful with it. But I think there could be a hybrid model where there are some control mechanisms in place that everybody plays according to the rules that we agreed upon, right? So that we can start the reclamation, but if we don't act in good faith, one way or another to get this done, that there are some things that can trigger to get you some of that control that you're seeking for. Because I can see your point of view that's saying, well, hey, if I go ahead and allow these people to go ahead and reclaim, then, how do we know that they're going to do what they say they're going to do, right? Coincide of that is the state mandates this, right? So it's really trumps me and everybody else. But leave that part aside. I can see that perspective. But I would think the city attorneys and Alicia on my part would be able to figure something out to protect the city of Pacifica so that, they realize that we're going in the right direction and that there's guardrails that I cannot get off on to circumvent what ultimately your desire is, while at the same time saying, hey, this is a project that needs to be done, we're going to comply with state rule and move forward. So it's a long answer, but...
No, and I understand the answer, and I understand, the economics of the app. Like, I understand that this application is not a small application cost-wise for you guys as well. But I do think, my question is less about being uncertain as to whether or not you guys will fulfill obligations and more about the quantity of fill, right? Because I think everyone's aligned in the fact that they want this piece of land to be usable. But it's land, right? And there's a limited amount of it. And you as a developer who's clearly I can tell from how cool what you just showed us is, right? There's a pride in it. Right. But once the land is used, it's used, right? We don't have it anymore. It's kind of gone forever, especially if it becomes, something that's subdivided. So there's a higher obligation to land, right? Mm-hmm. And so my question is more about why, and I said this at the beginning of the last meeting, but why we're talking about 580 and 350 and 870, right? Why are we talking about those numbers when we don't know what the best end use of the land is? And when I feel like we've jumped to the end, but we missed the middle.
Yeah, but I do think more thought went into that than I think you, with all due respect, give credit to, right? Because it's a very complex piece of land, because the creek that runs through it and the slope requirements that SMARA has for safety and the height of the quarry pit really end up, if you look at all the plans, the way the one back in 96 or whatever it was, they all ended up with about 800 to 900,000 yards. Well, some of them, they crushed the wall down and stuff and it wasn't hauled in. But if you look at just look at the cubic feet that we have to fill and meet those slope requirements, they all ended up using about the same amount of dirt. And then when you go down to the 570 or something like that, I mean, what that ends up doing is it contemplates that you have this acreage there that you could then potentially develop, and again with some height would still basically fill in that same volume. It would just be with development rather than with dirt. And you got to bear in mind also that there's already 30 feet of dirt has already been hauled into this quarry, right? So there's already a bunch of dirt there. And so it's not super easy to say, hey, we're just going to do something with that, right? So a lot of thought went into it, and that's why we had 2,000 some pages of reports.
Yeah.
And Matt can comment more on it, but I don't think, let me just, excuse me. But I don't think the numbers were arbitrary. Where I think you can move the numbers around is by again seeing what ultimately you put on there. But that you're going to be looking at around that 500,000 number, I think that's, from everything that I've seen, is pretty bare bone minimum. And yeah, I think the million was just to try to make it look as pretty as possible and fill totally in. So that's kind of where I think.
I appreciate your response. I do think there's a difference between native fill and foreign fill, which I don't think is a surprise to hear me say.
No,
I do think a development plan would be a good thing.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Does anyone else have questions for Mr. Hewlett or the applicant?
Just one more quick question. I don't know whether it's better for the civil engineer or the applicant, but back to that original question that I asked when I was talking about a soil contractor versus a grading contractor. You referenced the plan from the 90s where they moved around a little bit over 1 million yards of fill, and I think you would find, I don't know, I would feel a lot more comfortable with less imported fill and more on-site moving the fill around. Have you investigated those possibilities a little bit more thoroughly? Is that a possibility according to your civil engineer? I understand you're not an expert in this.
I'm not an expert in it, so I would just be mimicking what he told me. So I think rather than hearing it from me, go to the source and have Matt comment on it.
I'd like to hear from the engineer, please. I'd like to hear from the engineer, please.
Sure, but one point of clarification.
I'd like to hear from the engineer, please.
So your question is about trying to maximize native fill. What our plan does right now is there's some loose material at the top of the Quarry hillside. And what our plan currently does there is recontours that and takes some of that as cut material. And that's the 70,000 cubic yards of fill material on our balance sheet. And we take that and bring it around to the pit to place it. And then aside from that, once we get that material removed, then we're really dealing with the sheer rock face that is much harder to excavate. And so part of my instruction when I started looking at the reclamation plan was to try to really focus on reclaiming the site and avoiding unconventional excavation that's going to take longer, be noisier, blasting, grinding, et cetera. So this was our...
Who did those instructions come from?
It came from basically after looking at, or it came from my client, but basically it came...
Who is your client?
My client is Billy Gilmartin.
Okay.
So that answer your question about the material?
Did you consider any other repurposing of any soils that are at the site?
Yeah, we did. So we looked at what soils would be conventionally excavated without using unconventional equipment. And that's what we came up with, was removing the soils from the top of the hill. You have the bluff on the west side, which is also pretty hard material, and then the Quarry face. So,
did you consider any retaining walls for those areas at all?
Smara section. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at the memo. We had a technical memo submitted November 14th. So we tried to outline the Smara requirements that were our focus. And one of those is essentially matching the existing surrounding topography or the intended end land use. So when my instruction was no development being proposed, our goal was to match existing topography.
Commissioner Wright, can I just ask a quick clarifying question on that?
Sure.
Was a rippability analysis completed?
I think Shane can speak better to that. He's the geotechnical engineer for the project.
Also, the Coastal Commission would be opposed to blasting as well.
Mr. Rodikar, was a rippability analysis completed?
No, not to my knowledge. One has not been performed on that rock face. Anecdotally, we've heard at least a couple times in past meetings that there was reference to blasting back in the day during original excavation. So the assumption at this point is the same would be required.
If you read the report that references blasting, it makes it clear that this is just a standard practice. So if that's is that the only that last report is the only thing that suggests the hard rock to you?
Other than it's present and very visible out there, and through
Okay.
visual evaluation, you can see that it's quite competent. There are portions of that face that are near vertical.
Got it.
And there's even isolated portions that are over vertical.
With no fissures?
Nothing that's worrisome
That's
from a
visible.
stability standpoint at this point.
Okay, sorry, Commissioner.
And back to Mr. Hewlett, I want to say that I myself personally have hiked quite a bit in the quarry and have appreciated being able to use it. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that you care almost as much about the land as myself, my fellow commissioners, the community, and staff do. Would you say that that is true?
Yeah, I do care about the land, for sure. I want to do something right.
And you are still willing to continue to try to work with us to get to something that works for all involved?
Yeah, yeah, of course we want to work with all involved. The reality is, though, for something to work for all involved means everybody needs to make good faith compromises, and that's the key, right? And I think we've tried to show some pretty good faith here. Also, we're trying to reduce the amount of fill and everything else that's involved with this, and so that I think it's a two-way street to work together. It's not a one-way street.
I have noticed that you have been making efforts to reduce the amount of fill, and I do appreciate that. And I guess I will reserve the rest of my questions for afterwards.
Mr. Gilmartin, did you want to add something?
I don't mean to be too hung up into the details, but I'm a general engineering licensed contractor. And I work with soil, I do grading, I do utility distribution, I do maintenance on wastewater infrastructure. And so I didn't want you to think I'm so narrowly focused in my profession or my expertise when it comes to construction. And so I hope that's important to you. I've been involved in major earthwork projects as well as utility distribution and various amounts of infrastructure construction in my career. So just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Godwin, hey, let's please be respectful. Commissioner Godwin.
I had one last question. It looks like there's a lot of activities that are going to go along in this project. I think it would help the community engagement and ourselves if we did something small as a first phase and demonstrate we succeeded in about the time you estimated it would do and accomplish a goal. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind to me is the 70,000 cubic yards of cut. Is there any way we could do that as kind of a first effort? Have a checkpoint, say, yeah, you said you could do it in 6 months or whatever the time frame is for it. You got it done in the amount of time, it didn't cause any problems, and it's finished. So could you think about some little phase steps that would help us build confidence in your approach?
Yeah, I think, again, having certain guardrails in place, like I discussed before, I think, if council can work that out with the various, attorneys involved, I think that makes sense. I think to mobilize an entire system for 70 yards to push dirt in 70,000 yards to put in, I think is very difficult to do that. And also, I think if you look at it, this disruption that's going to create and then stop again and start up again, I think that's just going to be a really problematic. I appreciate you wanting to see that. But I just think the scale of this project is going to make it difficult because of all the mobilization that needs to be done just to get to that 70,000 yards. I mean, you need to have the road up there to get up there, and I mean, there's just it's a sizable project. So having guardrails in place, I am all for, but that indirectly would phase it, But I think it'd be very difficult to say, oh, we're just doing this 70,000 yards and nothing else. Because I'm also not complying with the state laws.
If no one else has, do you have a question, Commissioner Wright?
I just had one quick, I believe you had mentioned that the Quarry pit existing is 30 feet, has 30 feet of fill in it currently. If I remember correctly, that was...
Matt told me that, right?
And was that if I remember reading the report, that was Caltrans from Highway 1 expansion? That was...
I don't know.
That fill, I believe one of the engineers could probably answer that question.
I don't know.
And
yeah, go ahead.
also, what would be the grade if it's 30 feet higher than it obviously was? It's a pit. What is the elevation for that roughly going to be?
I don't know the origination of the fill material, but there is at least 20, and as I recall, maybe as much as 30 feet of existing fill in the bottom of the pit right now.
I believe that was identified in the report that was Caltrans Highway 1 from many, many years ago.
I don't know the source of the fill.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Being that this is a study session, do you have questions for us that you would like answers?
No, I just want to thank you guys for listening to me and the team, and thank you very much. Hopefully we can work something out together. Thank you very much for your time.
We appreciate you attending.
Actually, I have one more quick question.
Oh, one more.
What kind of time frame do you expect this to take, not to get to completion, but what kind of time frame are you willing to work with us to try to get to that kind of compromise? Do you have a specific amount of time in mind?
Well, I think, everything, of course, depends on how quickly we can get the fill or not, right? But assuming that things would go, based upon past experiences, I would believe that, if we were to start filling today, that we'd have probably, I would say, 18 months to 2 years to work together to come up with something good. And then, yes, it would be filled up a portion of the way. So we'll have plenty of time to come up with that plan and say, okay, we're going to stop the fill. So it's not like we need to come up with this community plan in 6 weeks. I believe that we have sufficient time. Just to mobilize this thing is going to take a fairly significant amount of time.
And would you be willing to engage in that process prior to starting any of that project?
You mean to start community engagement before we start doing the fill itself? I really want to treat the two separately. I don't want to combine them because the community voted that down in the past, right?
But you are committed to start on that community process as soon as possible?
I'm committed to starting on that community process as soon as possible, but I do not want to tie it with, a new reclamation plan.
Different basket.
Yeah.
I believe Commissioner Berman had one follow-up question.
Yeah, follow-up question on that. Thank you, Commissioner Wright. And kind of circling back to something that Chair Hauser requested, I guess if the study session request in front of us is to tie in a reclamation plan with a specific plan development process, which I understand will help minimize the amount of fill, which makes a lot of sense because you're filling in, like you said, basements, instead of import. I guess right now we're talking about wanting to keep the reclamation plan separate from the development. So, because I really loved what Chair Hauser presented in, understanding that the amount of import will be determined by how much we could actually reuse on site for development, or rather how much fill we could generate on site with development. Then to me it sounds like we don't really have a reclamation plan until we have at least the idea of a specific plan. So they do very much seem tied, and I came into this meeting thinking that that's why this whole thing makes sense, because they're tied together.
Well, they're not tied together. I think what we're looking at we're looking at alternative reduced fill options, and I think within the reclamation plan that we presented, right, with the reduced fill, we think that is a good alternative that gets a building plat, whatever it is, 6 or 7 acres, to build things on. And once we know what that is, we can, try to reduce that further. I would look at it, instead of tying them together, I would say we could work on them coterminously, and so that because it takes a significant amount of time to actually fill this quarry, this is not happening overnight. It just takes 3 to 4 years to do that. If we take 2 years to plan that, we probably only have half the fill even in there. And we all know it needs a certain amount of fill to fill this in, right? I mean, everybody knows that it's not going to be zero.
Okay,
So,
okay.
I guess not everybody agrees with that. So,
We're gonna
sorry,
go
I
to
shouldn't have
community
used a
comment.
general statement there. I believe that it's going to take a certain amount of fill to comply with SMARA, and we presented that. I think we can reduce that some with development, and if we work coterminously on that, we can come up with a final reclamation plan and revise that reclamation plan that is approved, that assumes no development.
Thank you. And just my only concern is that I understand the specific plan process will take time. And we want to make sure if we do pursue this, we want to make sure we get thorough community engagement, several town halls, virtual opportunities to give input. What I would not like to see is the specific plan process rushed because we're trying to catch up to the reclamation, which got started in advance of actually knowing how much development will occur and where. So I kind of wanted to voice my concern as we could work through together, as we collaborate during this process, maybe we could find ways to address it.
Yeah, and I do think that with the engineers, along with the attorneys, I think we can work on a critical phasing plan. And, obviously you as a developer have lots of experience with critical plans, and how we have just these different steps that, so that we know when we need to have all these meetings, and we can make a reasonable estimate as how the fill is going, and then just to make sure that we don't get ahead of ourselves, right? We don't get ahead of the amount of fill with the planning. And I personally believe, and obviously it is up to the city to independently verify that there's a reasonable amount of time to allow people to really give their input to see what is going to happen there, and still move forward with it. That's my personal belief, and I would work toward that to the best of my ability. I'm not trying to pull a fast one on this. And again, I'm not in the business of dirt. Dirt is not necessarily my friend. That doesn't sound that way because I'm trying to have this plan approved, but I mean, it's something I'm required to do by SMARA.
Chair, I hope to offer a little bit more context from the city staff perspective as well. So this site, as we've discussed before, it's located in the coastal zone. It's not currently in the city's certified local coastal program, which means subsequent to any presumed city approval of a reclamation plan, the owner needs to also obtain a coastal development permit from the Coastal Commission. That's sometimes a lengthy process. We can't speculate necessarily how long that will take, but if we were to just pick a number for sake of this discussion tonight, 6 to 12 months for sake of discussion. So that's some additional time built in during which some of the preliminary administrative steps at minimum could occur to arrange the mechanism, the contracting, et cetera, for a specific planning process. And then subsequent to some future coastal development permit approval by the Coastal Commission, then there's final grading permit review and approvals by the city, pre-construction activities, mobilization of the contracting team, site preparation, et cetera. So there's a fair amount of time before reclamation could even begin upon conclusion of the city's reclamation plan process. Additionally, I think it's important to recognize that, as Mr. Huell has indicated, he has a legal obligation to undertake reclamation and needs to obtain an approved reclamation plan. It's not clear how long the state will give the city to ensure that that is in place. But what I can say is that the state has recently inquired and in fact inspected the site in relation to the uncompleted reclamation. And so it's anybody's guess if the state's going to follow up on that and on what timeline. But it is, I think, conspicuous that this is not a reclaimed quarry. And so we don't have an open-ended amount of time to undertake a specific planning process and then come back and consider approval of an updated reclamation plan. So there are some practicalities in association with that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Murdoch. I think that if the process is collaborative, as we're talking about with the property owner, I think, you know, the state hasn't been interested in this site for 30 years, 40 years, whatever it is, but they're interested now because this is happening. So I think if we're collaborative, a lot of that interest potentially goes away. I don't know. But I think we still have to be responsible to the fact that the land needs to be reclaimed thoughtfully, right? And to pick back up on what Commissioner Berman just said, it's hard for me to think about, you know, if we don't know where buildings are going and we don't know what type of foundations they are, then it's hard to understand where the fill goes and what type of fill it is. Is it clay? Is it sand? Is it gravel? Is there differential settlement? So I think if this is done collaboratively, a lot of that gets answered thoughtfully. And to Mr. Huell's point, Pacifica could be left with something that everyone feels good about in 30 more years, right? Instead of, I don't know. So I don't know, Commissioner Wright?
I wholeheartedly agree with that, but I do have a quick question for staff. Earlier in his presentation, he had mentioned a third party coming in to help us work collaboratively. Is that something that seems appropriate, feasible, a positive step from a staff perspective?
Right, thank you, Commissioner Wright. I think what I understood from Mr. Huell's comments was that he's envisioning that the city would hire a consultant with specific planning expertise to formulate a preferable process and to help manage the engagement with the community, guide the technical studies, prepare the visualizations and rendering, and all of those components of a specific planning process. I share that same expectation. We absolutely would need to do that as the city staff. We don't have the internal city staff capacity to undertake that level and specificity of work that's associated with that kind of process. And so we would go out for a qualified consultant to lead that sort of process that the city staff would manage and guide.
Would you see that as a shared expense, a applicant expense, or a city expense?
As we've envisioned the process on the city side, it would need to be primarily funded by the property owner in relation to future development of that property, but with full control on the city side to manage the nature and the conduct of that planning process in coordination with the community.
And, sir, is that what you were envisioning as well?
Yeah, I was envisioning to assist with that because your staff is, very busy, and if we want to do this in a reasonable time frame, I think to help experts to support that, I think makes a ton of sense. Again, it makes sense for everybody to do that. So yeah, that was my understanding. And then in terms of the comment of what kind of fill, I just want to say one word about it. I mean, we vetted that out, I think, quite carefully in our plan. I do agree that when you do foundations, you want to have some sand, and which you're absolutely right about that. But the way I kind of look at it is, if you have your tank, you can go on a trip with a tank. We can drive to downtown San Francisco here with a full tank, or we also can drive to downtown San Francisco with 3/4 of a tank, you'll know you'll make it to San Francisco with 3/4 of a tank, or 1/3 of a tank of gas, right? Or battery power, whatever you want to do. And so my thinking with this reclamation plan is we've brought it down so far that I don't think that there's going to be an earth-shattering change. I guess I want to be honest and transparent about that. It's not gonna, in my view, from everything that I've seen on the 2,600 some pages and the 6 years that I've seen them work on this, I just don't see them bringing this fill down to 50,000 yards, for example, right? So I think if we are allowed to go ahead and move forward, we can fine tune it and make it as good as possible. But it's yeah. So I guess that's my point I wanted to make. That it needs to be maybe in conjunction with each other, but we're going to have a certain amount of fill anyway. So if we do that now or do that 6 years from now, I mean, we have to get through it. We're not going to go around it. So that's kind of my view of it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I guess I got one more.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have one more.
Sorry, quick comment before we get to public comment. I think one thing that I would really stress is that we differentiate between fill and import. If you look at all the different plans that have been approved over the years, they actually do have a fairly consistent through line of fill quantity. It's the import quantity that seems to change drastically. And on that note, we received some staff reporting about communication they've had with your team that potentially is a number as small as 350,000 yards of import would be possible considering a final development plan, but that a reduced fill alternative could be possible with no development plan at around 580,000 yards. That's a 65% increase in import based on the final development, and something I guess I'd like to see, because it sounds like we're going to view a plan without any development attached to it. There's no way to get that done before this plan comes back before us. Is some kind of a phasing plan that allows us to see an off-ramp whereby if a site-specific plan is done, we could cut the fill where it is, and it just reduces taking dirt in and out, and more import and off-haul potentially for your future use. So I think that would be something that would be beneficial for us to envision the project.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're thinking the same thing, that there be some kind of, I call it guardrails, but off-ramp is another way to depict that maybe better. And I think the way that needs to be done is by making a critical path for the different timelines and showing how to best do that. So I see your point there.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. So seeing no more questions, I'm going to go to community comment, and I'm going to call 3 speakers so that you know what order you're going in. So reminder that we're going to have 1.5 minutes per speaker. I think it's really important that we get to everyone. So I appreciate that that's not a long time, and it wasn't, that decision, which was made by me, was not done lightly. So with that being said, let's put our community comment call-in information on the screen, if you please. And we're going to go first to Susan Herring, then Mark Hubble, then Perry Matlock. And please do speak into the microphone so that everyone can hear you.
Good evening. Thank you for having this study session. I've spoken before here, but now I'm confused about the amount of dirt that is possibly going to go into this site, and I don't know how many truckloads might come in. I'm concerned about the trucks on Highway 1 and the effect they will have on traffic, and also that this is unceded Ohlone land, and I would hope that you all would reach out to the Ramaytush Ohlone to discuss with them what they would put in.
Thank you very much, Susan. All right, Mark, and then Perry, and then Debbie Santiago.
Hi, my name is Mark Hubble, and I'm confused about something. I used my, status as a citizen of California to call the Bureau of Mine Reclamation and talk to a person who was really familiar with the project. And the answer was that the bottom line is you have to make it safe for recreational purposes. There wasn't anything above that, and that was it, repeated to me about 3 times in the conversation. So instead of just looking just at what goes into the mine, I'd like to say that the health effects of diesel exhaust, as we breathe the toxic gases and small particles of diesel exhaust, are drawn into our lungs. Long-term exposure to diesel exhaust particles poses the highest risk of cancer of any toxic air contaminant evaluated by OEHA, ARB, estimates that about 70% of the cancer risk in the average California faces from breathing toxic pollutants from diesel exhaust particles. The timeline submitted by the trucking company, 70 to 80 truckloads per day. They're going by grade schools, they're going by high schools, they're going up and down the hill. One of them is only 108 feet from the playground recreation of one elementary school, less than 600 feet from a high school, and anyways.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
That's a very dangerous situation. I hope we think about it.
All right, guys. Okay, we're going to go to Perry Matlock, then Debbie Santiago, then Kata Gomez. And I'm just going to remind you guys that, again, there may be someone that doesn't feel safe speaking. So I want to make sure that this feels like a kind room for everyone.
Good evening. My name is Perry Matlock. Thank you, council members, for providing this public hearing. I am born and raised in San Francisco. I traveled here tonight to support the Ramaytush Ohlone Nation. North of us is Omporomo. South of us is Puistak. Right now, we're probably in the area of Timigtak. I have been a volunteer with the International Indian Treaty Council, Sacred Sites Protection, Rights of Indigenous Tribes, other Native organizations, and founder of Save the Shell Mounds. I bid you to very much consider what you're doing. This is a heritage site. From what I understand, this mine isn't 200 years old. It's more like 2,000 years old or more. Ohlone people have been known to be mining this area for a very long time. When the Spanish invaded this area, they actually enslaved Ohlone people who were already mining the area as using the limestone for wash on their adobes. This ought to be a UNESCO site. It's a heritage site, it's a cultural treasure, and ought not to be taken lightly. And they'll recognize the Ramaytush Ohlone and appreciate that this is their heritage. There's no other part of the world where they have these places. They're only here. And when they're developed and destroyed, they're gone forever. So please respect the Ramaytush Ohlone, save the shell mounds, and remember there are other heritage places which might not have been recovered by archaeologists, which are still there. Where's the environmental impact report? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Debbie Santiago, and then Kata Gomez, and then Cliff Lawrence.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Santiago, born and raised in San Francisco. I'm at the Washishu tribe, federally recognized tribe of Nevada, California. I'm here with my relatives, the Ramaytush. And I'm also wanting to say thank you very much for giving us this time to speak. And also at this sacred time, I want to say that I don't think the council, I don't think these business people are hearing the citizens here of Pacifica, and also a cultural relevance of the Ramaytush. I mean, what gives the right to say that you're going to fill in a sacred area that belongs to the rightful stewards of this land, and that's the Ramaytush. This also brings back a lot of historical trauma for a lot of our intertribal people and the tribal people that live here and around Pacifica. So in order you to say that this is going to be a place of what you're going to fill in, no. Sorry, you need to rethink about what is happening here and give that recognition here to the Ramatish. In other words, land back to the Ramatish. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kata Gomez, Cliff Lawrence, and then Ron Michael.
This was a more difficult evening to prepare for than I had expected. So throughout my earlier plans, I have to be blunt. One, we really appreciate you being here, Mr. Yulee. I have a feeling I like you, and I think we would enjoy working with you. I'm a little bit more suspicious of your partner because of his reputation. My big pitch here and the whole thing is do no harm. Let's do no harm. Let's not impact the biology, the chemistry, what we know here and have come to love. We're not looking for the quarry to be destroyed, restored to some point before its existence. We embrace it. Now, we know that you're only required to make it safe. You're not required to make it look like it was never there. And we hope, I want to work with you very much. And of course, with this great commission, thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. I didn't see Kata Gomez. Is she here? Yeah. Hi, Kata.
Thank you, Mr. Yulee. I've been wanting to speak with you. My name is Kata Gomes, descendant from the village of Tamigtok, Ramatush. This is my ancestral village. My ancestors have been planted and buried in this soil. Unlike you, I am totally connected to this soil. My DNA is in this soil. This soil is part of me. This is our unceded Ramatush homeland. Unceded means there was never any compensation given to the tribe for the land taken. This land is stolen land. All of California is, unless it is already under indigenous stewardship, is stolen land. You talk about going by the law. Where's the justice for all that you all just pledged to that flag? Liberty and justice for all has not come to our people. It's a time for change, and the time is now. Land back. I'm the founder and executive director of Muchiate Indigenous Land Trust. We're ready. We want our homeland. We want to be part of the solution that colonization has created. Our people mined this area, but not to the level of extraction that has happened in the last 100 years. We are the stewards chosen by Creator. There's no one else better suited for having input on what happens to this land
Thank you,
than us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Guys, I know I sound like a broken record, and I appreciate that emotions are charged, but please try to restrain the clapping. Ron Michael, followed by Beth Craig, and then Owen Bridges.
Okay, try to get this. Testing. Okay. Anyway, name's Ron Makel. I want to remind everybody, and especially Mr. Huell, about the considering doing a charrette. I remember some of us here probably remember the charrette that Mr. Peebles put on. Anyway, it's something to consider at the Lighthouse Hotel, have a nice charrette. But I just want to say that I was on the Planning Commission many years ago, and three of the largest developments that took place in Pacifica, Connemara, Harmony One, and Fassler, they all dedicated 50, 60, and Connemara, 80% of the development site went to open space. Connemara, conservation easement, and up over there, open space. So I really think that the west side of the creek, which is the issue here, and I know it could be done, you just need to brainstorm. You spend so much time, I think you've really taken the wrong approach here, the way you've been going about this, Mr. Hewell, and it's not your fault. You know, you're out, you have business to run, you're a businessman, I can understand, but, you know, we really need to consider making the west side of the creek, try to develop, I don't know who would do it, but conservation easement for that. And then you've got your open space dedication, which is really looked forward to by Pacifica. They like to see a lot of open space. Dedicate that to a conservation easement, then use the flat lands for, you know, for your development. So that's what I think you need to consider. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Beth Craig, followed by Owen Brisges, and then Alberta Snowden. I apologize if I'm misreading that. Owen, are you here?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll put Beth Craig after you since you're here.
Hi, Owen Brisges, 1203 Galvez Drive. I wanted to talk about toxic soil today and soil testing, but I'm not. I'm going to respond to some of the comments I heard so far. One of them is the councilman's point about unstable cliffs. I too frequent the quarry, and the most unstable, steepest, most dangerous cliffs are those on the ocean side of the quarry. They are covered with mining spoils and overburden. They're collapsing into the ocean. This EIR and this reclamation plan do not address those slopes, and that is a requirement of SMART to make this site safe. So you cannot approve the EIR or reclamation plan. Which brings me to the second point, which is good news, is that I'm a registered civil engineer in California, and there is a solution that will not require any import of soil for the reclamation plan. I think the civil engineer has spoken to the fact that he has been asked, and I'm putting words in his mouth, reading some of the different documents, that he's being asked to come up with a Samara solution that maximizes fill and imported fill and maximizes the amount of developable land on top of the quarry. If you were to rewrite the problem statement saying we want to minimize the amount of fill that comes into this community and that minimize the amount of disturbance, there's a civil engineering solution for you.
Thank you, Owen. I appreciate it. Beth Craig? Is Beth here? I'm sorry I skipped you, Beth. Hi. And then Alberta, followed by Betty Montague.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Hewell, for being here today. My name is Beth Craig, and I'm on the board of the Muchiate Indigenous Land Trust, and I would like to give the few seconds that I have left to Kata, who has a few more things to say.
You know, let me just look to Ms. Gomes. I just need to make sure, because this is above my pay grade here, so I'm going to check with the city attorney. Do we allow people to see time?
We're sorry, we're talking about the Planning Commission bylaws and what they provide about seating time.
You've stumped us, Kata. Give us 1 moment.
Okay.
Okay.
Roberta just requested me to speak for her as well.
Yeah, it seems like the respectful thing to do.
I understand that at council meetings, they're not allowed to cede their time, so it would be consistent for the Planning Commission to have similar regulations for someone who's already spoken.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Karen.
Oh, I apologize. So the council, at council meetings, the council is not allowed to accept ceding time from speakers to cede time to someone who's already spoken, so it would be consistent for the Planning Commission to have a similar approach.
Okay, I'm sorry, Kata.
Okay, Beth, would you come back and speak? Beth, would you come back and speak? Because they're not allowing me to speak.
So tonight, as I'm listening to you all, what comes to my mind is also I really don't understand how the reclamation can happen before the site plan. And then, in addition, I didn't hear any discussion of speaking with the Ramaytush people, the Ramaytush descendants, before the reclamation takes place, because it seems to me there's been some covering up of the archaeology, and some of that has come to light. I think a letter from the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone has been given to the council. So I think that needs to take place before the reclamation can happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Alberta, followed by Betty Montague, followed by Juan Richardson.
Hello, my name's Alberta Snyder. I'm a Shishu also, and I've come to speak for our land here. This is our land, and that whatever is going on, we need to have it done in a good, safe way, that it not only will the building, people take care and build in a good way, because this is our land. No matter who lives here now, this is our land, and we all need to remember how to take care of it. And the construction that goes on, they need to remember, this is still like they said before, the dirt that flies in the air, the ground that they're opening up, and the animals and everything else that is in our land. It is here, and they need to remember how to take care of it for the Ramaytush, for our people, all of us here that live here on this land. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Betty Montague, followed by Juan Richardson, followed by
I have one thing to say on Planning Commission. Deny the Bayland soil proposal for the quarry. I think we've been fighting the development of the quarry for years. It always gets voted down. I think they're trying to mess with the people of Pacifica. My suggestion, leave the gardens alone and let people take care of them. Remove the non-native plants, plant with natives, create some ponds, and make it the way the Ramaytush, excuse my name, the native people, indigenous people, it should be restored to the way it was before the Europeans started coming in and mucking things up. And I think this is just, why have a study? I think it's just a ploy by these darn developers who want to come in and muck around. People use it for recreation and other things. It's just saying no to Bayland soil and tell them to take them to Holland or wherever they want to go.
Okay. All right. Juan Richardson, followed by Leo Leon, followed by Sue Christensen.
Hello, everybody. I'm Juan Richardson. I live in Pacifica since 1988. I go through that area regularly on a bike. It's on the bike path, and I can't imagine what it's going to be like with big trucks going down there. Also, in the last 2 weeks, I've seen 2 snakes there. I'm just wondering what kind of environmental impact all those trucks of dirt are going to have on the wildlife there. It sounds like there's a mandate that we do some reclamation or something here, but it also sounds like that was in 1975, and we've been ignoring it successfully since then. And I think everybody is happy with the way it is now, and I'd say that it's working, ignoring that mandate.
Okay. Leo Leon, followed by Sue Christensen, followed by Nico Bellomini. I think I got it right this meeting.
There's still time on the clock. Did I get to use that too? Okay. Good evening. After all is said and done tonight, we still have a reclamation plan currently under consideration by the Planning Commission, and we need to deal with that. We need to resolve that plan And speaking about that, I do not see how the current Quarry reclamation plan can go forward if there's going to be a piecemeal approach that transitions the project from a reclamation plan with intentions for a development plan. I believe the law requires that we study all those impacts together, avoid piecemealing. I do not think that's a good idea. So we need to address that. I think the Planning Commission should reconvene the public hearing, hear all the answers to all the questions that were requested at the last official hearing. That did not happen tonight. And we had more of a presentation tonight and a one-sided dialogue. So let's open it up and have a real hearing on the issue. And I'll keep it brief. I'm a photographer. I photograph the Quarry. I photograph a lot of coastal scenes. And the last picture I took, I think I sent it to you today, it shows the Quarry. The Quarry is beautiful the way it is. And in fact, I don't think anything at all needs to happen to make it any better. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. All right. Sue, followed by Nico, followed by Ken Miles.
Hi, my name is Sue Christensen, and I heard about the Quarry, and then I just educated myself. My big question is, when is Pacifica going to look at itself long-term as this incredible, rarefied place of natural beauty, develop that on a small scale so that if we need money, we attract high-paying tourists because it's so intimately beautiful and taken care of. And that would also tie in with some of the native folks who are talking about it. I used to live in the city, and I've lived here 20 years, and I cannot believe when I walk out the door, this is where we live. So in these days of climate change, in these days of everything toxic going everywhere, I would really caution putting fill from places that we don't know where it's coming from, which will probably have toxic materials. I would really caution 141 diesel trucks a day going up and down our roads for 4 years. Diesel fuel has particulate matter, which is cancerous, and we all live in valleys, which the air gets trapped in, and the fog will also invert the air. So these just don't seem like really good ideas. The Quarry can be re-sculpted. We can do the no-fill plan, and that would take care of the reclamation.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you. Nico Bellomini, followed by Ken Miles, and then Dan Underhill.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Nico. I'm 22 years old and a 22-year-old resident of Pacifica. I was here last time, and I wanted to restate a couple things from the last meeting. I remember the plan from the 90s reclamation that had stated no foreign soil. We just talked about that. And I was wondering, is grinding noise from the processing of native soil really worse than inevitable trucking accidents and increased other road accidents involved? It's also important to remember that when trucks leave a site containing a dirt, especially when it's wet in the winter, it turns to mud, and these trucks will drag out debris on the roadway. I have a hauling company, so I go to the dump a lot. At the local landfill I go to, it's Ox Mountain Sanitary Landfill, they have trucks and street sweepers that go constantly cleaning up debris and stuff on the road from the trucks leaving the dirt areas. And that avoids, slick conditions on the roadway that can lead to accidents. And I was wondering if that cleanup precaution is considered, and if so, is that included in the traffic increase of the 0.03%? If there's no planned cleanup of roadways from debris and trailed out with the trucks, residents are likely to suffer many hazards, including broken windshields. And also I wanted to say, as a hauling company, I deal with dirt a lot. The cubic yards of dirt go for around $150 at a minimum to dispose of per yard. The amount to be dumped originally proposed by the developer equates to around $104 million of dump fees at a standard landfill or transfer station. I'm not sure what the exact number in the new proposal is, but you can calculate it yourself by multiplying the number of cubic yards times around $150, which is the average cost of each yard per disposal. So I personally believe this is a profitable dirt dump to the developer with nothing to give to the residents of Pacifica. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. Thank you. Okay, guys. We will take a recess if we can't stop clapping. I don't want to do it either. Ken Miles, followed by Dan Underhill, followed by Remy Tan.
Good evening. I'm Ken Miles. Lived in Pacifica 50 years, and all of that been in the back of Valimar. And back about 25 years ago, when they built the wastewater treatment plant, my interest in the Native Americans, the Ohlone people, had brought me to try to fight the development of that. And they said, the city council at that time, there's no Ohlone people around. So I went to AIM, American Indian Movement, and we came back down there, and sure enough, they found some residues and stuff, and the city promised that there was going to be an archaeologist on board. Never happened, I don't believe. So I just want you to know that this is a state archaeological site. It has been for many years. So anything that's done here will have to also go through the state, probably the Coastal Commission. Now, living in Valimar for all this time, we've had problems when they were grinding the rock and everything, and the wind would be carrying not only the noise, but dust and grit and everything else, and that's what will be coming up back to the Valimar and into the school site and elsewhere. And lastly, who's going to validate that the soil is free of biological, chemical, or metal and bricks and rock and stuff that we don't want? I don't think that we can do it. It'll be the burden of the developer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, moving on to Dan. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. It's 9:17. We'll reconvene at 9:22.
itself for the last 30 years. And it's had a hard time doing it. And if we wanted to actually help it recover, we could pull some of the intrusive plants out of there, and there's lots of things we could do. But dumping dirt on top of its progress is not restoration or recovery or anything like it. And I think we shouldn't be considering anything that involves piling dirt on what nature has been trying to do for the last 30 years. That's it.
Thank you, Dan. Remy Tan, followed by Dan Stechnik, followed by Michael Balistner.
Hello, Remy Tan, longtime resident of Pacific Manor. I'm 27 years here. The EIR on this thing is completely faulty. It doesn't address at all the air pollution from the trucks or the noise from the trucks. It doesn't even account for the fact that there are electric trucks now, like Tesla, Daimler, and Volvo. They can be used to haul the dirt if that's even needed, as well as for the construction equipment. So it's already out of date, and it's not considering the archaeological, the Native American, Ramaytush, and any of the other historic issues on the site. So I think the Plan Commission needs to basically void and reject the EIR and tell them to go back and account for all these things, plus the global warming issues and that sort of thing. I'm glad to hear that the developers thinking about using basement parking and maybe conference center in there in that area and trying to reduce the dirt. And I'm glad he's talking about working with the community, and that absolutely needs to happen. And I'm very heartened to hear that the Planning Commission here is talking about that it is integral to any future development. So I think, we need to pump the brakes on this thing, figure out again in a public forum what we want to do, and come up with
Remy, thank you.
a decent plan for the reclamation. Thank you.
Okay. Dan Stechnik, followed by Michael Balistner, and then Lori Goldberg.
Good evening, planning staff. Thanks for hearing me. The appellant, Paul Hula, said, I'm not a dirt guy, but he is a contaminated dirt guy. He said it was a coincidental situation how we met each other responding to the contractor. Was that in prison? Because on February 15, 2022, the appellant was changed from the felons William Gilmartin and Alan Varela, convicted in U.S. federal court and also accused of fraud, conversion, and breach of fiduciary duty for bribing Mohammed Nouri of San Francisco, sentenced to 2 to 3 years in prison. These guys are felons, okay? You're dealing with felons. You're selling our city out to felons. The idea that there's no recognition that this is a cultural treasure. This should be a UNESCO site. I mean, this is going to be your lasting legacy. 20 years from now, you're going to be, remember those planning commissioners that the city council stuck you with that decision? I'm so disappointed that not a single city council member showed up today to face the people on that. That's 3 different meetings. Every single city council person has been derelict in. Maybe these guys do need to be recalled. Thank you very much.
All right, Dan, thank you. Michael Balistner, followed by Lori Goldberg, followed by Paul Stoffen.
Hello, my name is Michael Balisteri. I've lived in Pacifica since 1968. I moved to Rockaway in 1977. My mother was a real estate agent here in town for 30 years. My father had Balesteri's restaurant a block from here. I've been in Pacifica The millionaire over here bought this land cheap, pennies on the dollar, and now acts like he's the victim here. He's saying, oh, do we have to go straight to the wedding? Oh, should we compromise? Oh, it was his risk to purchase this land for the price he did, and now he acts like he has heavy right to do whatever he wants with this land. Whenever people talk about what's the end use of this land, I think the end use of this land should be keeping the land the way it is now. I don't think not developing the land is not using land. People are using this land every day. I think we should keep it the same. My stepfather used to be here, and he told me there was mountain goats on this land. In '77, when I came, there was jackrabbits, cottontails, everything else. I was the one who stood out there with the Lorax sign when your Proposition L failed, and I'm going to be the next time there. You're going to see signs on the highway, and you're going to see me standing out there holding those signs. And I'm going to hold everybody accountable that's making decisions on this. We need to protect the environment. There needs to be traffic safety. I was half a mile from this. I saw people die, screaming underneath their cars, bleeding to death. And I was there trying to lift their car off of them. These trucks weigh 50,000 pounds. He says there's going to be 0.3% impact on that. Every 20 seconds, that light is going to stop. And people are going to have to go by. And this 50,000-pound truck is going to come by. It's totally
Thank you
dangerous.
for your comment. Thank you for your
He got
comment.
to speak for an hour and a half, and the fact that we get to speak for a minute and a half doesn't seem fair either.
I understand. All right, Lori, followed by Paul Stoffen, followed by Kurt Kiest.
I'm really kind of disappointed because this was supposed to be a study session, and I thought it was going to be a study session supposedly on the reclaiming of the quarry and about this dumping of dirt, and there's so much that has not even been planned, and I can't even believe that you would even want to consider any of this. What about all the animals that live in the quarry right now? What's going to happen to them when they're all covered up? You know that song by Joni Mitchell, You Pay Paradise to Put Up a Parking Lot? We have a beautiful open space area there. People come from other states, other countries, other areas in the Bay Area, and they walk in there. And how can Mr. Hewley and these people have any consideration or care about this quarry? They don't even live here. They want to make money off of it. They don't care what happens in Pacifica. They don't care if we have 500% more increase in traffic. They don't care if there's 30 million more cars in Pacifica. There's more accidents. There's more crime. There's more whatever. And once you ruin that quarry, once you pave that paradise, that's it. There's no more paradise. There needs to be a lot more studies. This is not a study session. This is a joke. I knew there was something more than just, oh, we're going to put dirt in there. I knew there was something about development. This is talking about development too. There's been no planning, no study session with any of the public of Pacifica, except talking about dumping tons and tons of soil. And how can the traffic only increase by 0.3%, whatever that dump-based soil guy said last time?
Thank you, Lori.
When our traffic is already like 100% worse and will be 200% worse. This is really sad, this money-thin, greedy stuff.
Thank you, Lori. Okay, Paul, followed by Kurt, and after Kurt is Rich Campbell.
Hello, my name's Paul Stoffen, 510 Rockaway Beach. I'm literally not even a mile from the site. And before that, I was literally maybe 5 cars from the site. I lived on the west side there. So I grew up here, 58 years old, I'll be 59 this year. I've got 2 beautiful daughters, and they're my grandchildren. And we enjoy this beautiful town and the open space. I actually voted to have a fire station and some stuff. And it went down. But, you know, I'm not for not having development. I'm just having issues with dirt coming from other places. I heard someone say something about possibly tearing down the high cliffs and using that as a safety belt. And it is kind of our Yosemite of sense, you know, in the Bay Area. People do come, and we got to rethink maybe our ideas. A moneymaker could be something, in my mind, maybe just letting big buses from San Francisco. I've seen it when the shutdown happened. People came and had a crab sandwich. You know, we got to rethink our ideas here. to a minimum, and definitely you as planning commissioners really put it in your hearts to keep Pacifica clean. I mean, I don't know, dirty dirt from somewhere else is not a good idea. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. So Kirk Heist, followed by Rich Campbell, and then Cindy Abbott.
Hi, I'm Kurt Keast. I live up on Talbot. Mr. Huell's comments tonight are the first time it's been stated that it costs dollars to get fill dirt. But for years in multiple meetings and letters, it has been accepted and not denied that you, Mr. Huell, and Baylands stands to make a large profit on each and every load of dirt brought in. Hence, the push by the applicant for more outside fill. My simple excavation at my home for a new driveway cost me nearly $1,000 per just 5 cubic yard truckload to haul away clean virgin dirt. And that was $600 for the dump fee and $300 for the trucking. So that's a lie to say that it costs you money to bring in dirt. Similarly, you're hiding in SMARA's rules to bring in way too much dirt. Explain why we can't start at the 135-foot match line and fill starting immediately at just the safe 2-to-1 grade adjacent to the quarry wall as well as the southern bluffs. Instead, you are filling it up to a nearly flat pad with a shallow grade from the 135 to the 100-foot level, and then only slope down at 2-to-1. But a revegetated, dimpled, shallow, bowl-shaped mound would be safe and beautiful and only use about 250,000 cubic yards. I propose an independent review by a civil engineer with SMARA expertise to devise a SMARA acceptable least fill calculation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Rich Campbell, followed by Cindy Abbott, and then Sam Casillas.
Hi, Rich Campbell. I was planning commissioner for about 13 years here. Good to see you all. Thank you for doing this. So approving this dump is going to require a lot of variances, zoning amendments, and section 9-4.3501 requires that before you do approve something here like that, that you find it in the public necessity and convenience and that the general welfare requires it. And that's your charge up here as planning commissioners. And actually, Mr. Murdoch, that's your charge as well. Your charge is not to find some way, somehow, to make this project work or pencil out for the developer. That's not your charge up here. Your charge is to give the applicant a fair shake, but at some point, it's got to be in the public welfare. It's got to be what's good for Pacifica. And then, so now you got to ask yourself, is this something that's good for Pacifica? And you've got, and let's be really clear here what the developer is proposing. It's not a fill reduction. I heard one commissioner get confused by this. He's saying, I'll reduce it to 500 and something cubic yards of fill if you do what I say by the time I fill 300 cubic yards. And if you don't, I'm going to fill 800 cubic yards. He's putting a gun to your head. He's putting a gun to all our heads. It's not collaborative, as I've heard it called. So keep that in mind.
Cindy Abbott, followed by Sam Casillas, and then Marge Davis.
Hello, I'm Cindy Abbott. How confusing for all of you and the community at large. You currently have a reclamation plan before you. You've had legal grounds to deny it, as has been documented in several attorneys' letters indicating extreme concerns with the air quality calculations, and I hope that you've all read the May 17th letter from the attorneys representing the leader of the Association of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. The EIR is inadequate, and you can't approve it. You do not have the least environmentally impactful project in front of you. And in this session, we've learned that there's been a clear misstatement of the intent of the project. It's development, as we always knew it was, because why else would there be a rezoning as part of a reclamation project? Piecemealing this project is a violation of CEQA. Earlier in his comments, Mr. Huell noted that it's taken him 30 years, 20 years, 10 years so far, and that if it's going to be another 20, so be it. So reject the reclamation plan and recommend to the City Council to move forward with a specific plan that moves things in orders. Mr. Hewley, I met you back in 2015, and we had a really good conversation. Do the right thing for the community, too, and address the safety issues that have nothing to do, as we heard from your engineer, where there are actual hazards in this community.
Thank you, Cindy. Okay, Sam Casillas, followed by Marge Davis, and then Peter Loeb.
Good evening, Commissioners. Let me be clear. This plan, regardless of how much soil is brought in, is illegal and would turn Pacifica into a toxic dump, super site fund, and would bankrupt the city. Any plans with imported soil is a non-starter. This is not just a small part of the community saying this. The vast majority of Pacificans are against turning Pacifica into a dump. It is ridiculous that the applicant is trying to follow up an out-of-this-world outrageous toxic soil fill plan with just a plainly outrageous toxic soil fill plan in an attempt to appear to be willing to compromise with the city. The EIR is also fatally flawed as it does not consider proper identification of protected species and needed foraging for the red-legged frogs, and never identified the existence of the western pond turtle, which has been documented the past month. I sent you those pictures earlier. You know, we also had Don Peebles say that he would be part of the long-term community. Where is that guy now? If the owner thinks that dirt costs money, great. Cut that cost out of them and then don't bring in any dirt. Also, the testing methodology is flawed. The test should be for all pathogens, not just sudden oak death, which is airborne, but should include soil-borne pathogens, which are super virulent and are super destructive. But they know this. It's because you can't test for that kind of stuff easily. So we're going to be bringing in those pathogens. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, Marge, followed by Peter, and then Celeste Langill.
Good evening. I'm going to read a statement for Dinah Verby, who couldn't be here, and I'm going to have to read it fast because I timed it. The applicant's attorney's letter presents an interesting history of the quarry site, and I would like to offer a different historical perspective. A major reason why this owner's ballot measure and all of the others failed was the lack of specific plan and development agreement that would have ensured that the promised commercial development would be built along with the housing. That is the same reason a public vote is required for residential. There were mixed-use projects in the past where only the residential component was built and the developers opted out of building the commercial, depriving Pacifica of the needed revenue while overburdening our infrastructure. The chicken and the egg dilemma described by the applicant's attorney is the very reason why the piecemeal development being attempted here is not only unwise, but illegal under CEQA and applicable federal rules. How can you approve a reclamation plan or decide the appropriate amount of fill, if any, without knowing the ultimate amount of development that will occur on the site? The answer is you can't and you shouldn't. Please do not accept the applicant's sliding scale proposal that would vary the amount of fill depending upon the outcome of the specific plan process. The very nature of this proposal, perhaps unwittingly, strengthens our legal argument that the FEIR is inadequate because the project description is unstable, the project has been improperly segmented, and the FEIR fails to examine the cumulative impact of the entire project, but instead analyzes only the reclamation phase as if the end use will be open space rather than mixed-use development. Dang it.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question? Is anybody else just incredibly exhausted by this whole thing? Because I am. I got to get up at 4, so nighty-night.
Thank you, Marge. Okay. Peter Loeb, followed by Celeste Longiel, and then Charles, I think this says Lily, but I apologize if I'm butchering names.
And I couldn't hear you. I don't know if you called my name because I couldn't hear it over the applause.
Yes. Thank you, Peter. So, Peter, it is your turn, and let's make sure that none of that counted in the 90 seconds.
Thank you. Peter Loeb. I've lived next to the quarry for 49 years. Mr. Hewlett makes it sound as if the State Mining and Reclamation Act requires that the quarry be filled in order to meet the requirements of the act. That's not true.
There are many ways in which the requirements of SMARA can be met without filling up the quarry. That's point one. The final EIR is inadequate as it stands, so you cannot approve this project with that EIR. People have mentioned other letters that are in the public comment record. I won't go over every one of them, but the EIR is inadequate. It cannot be approved. The City Council has a goal of developing a specific plan for the quarry. Finally, for the first time in this meeting, people are talking about doing a development plan in concert with a reclamation plan, which was the only way to do rational planning. It's piecemealing to do reclamation and then a development plan later. That's not allowed under CEQA, under Army Corps of Engineers regulations, and my time is up. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Peter. All right, we have Celeste Longueuil, Charles Lilly, and then Kimberly Finale, and after that I only have 2 more cards, so if you were waiting to get your cards in, now's the time.
Good evening, Celeste Longueuil. I'm a former planning commissioner, so thank you for your service. I haven't actually been participating much in city government for a while, but I was quite often, and I was just sort of shocked showing up with a study session to discuss the reclamation plan and alternatives, and I was shocked to hear just so much discussion about development. And as others have said, this is improper segmentation under CEQA, which requires that environmental review must encompass the whole of an action affecting the environment, and that an agency can't chop up a large project into many little ones to minimize its total environmental impact. So I'm not going to say there's bias here, but it just seems like, wow, we went off the reclamation plan and we dove into different alternatives without even discussing the fact that the EIR, what you were looking for, instead of like how many feet of you can put a building on. CEQA requires an environmentally superior alternative. The reclamation plan and EIR are not adequate to minimize environmental impacts. There's many comments on this, but there's 0 fill needed on the eastern parcel, 0. You need to minimize the import of foreign soil. In 2013, Caltrans EIR recognized the eastern parcel entire thing with suitable habitat for red-legged frog and San Francisco garter snake. And there's so much information missing in the EIR that you really need to just step back, and if you're going to do a specific plan, do a specific plan, but do not piecemeal this improperly.
Thank you, Celeste. Thanks. Thank you. Charles Lilly, followed by Kimberly Finale, and then David Phelps.
My name is Charles, last name Liu, and I have worked in UCSF and Sequoia Hospital about 30 years. In cardiology. So I met many patients from all over California and other states. When they ask me, where do you live? I said, I'm living in Pacifica. 100% of them say, Pacifica is a beautiful place. When they say beautiful, they didn't mention any structure or any buildings. They mentioned the hills, the ocean, the environment. So I have only been living in Pacifica for last 15 years, and I enjoy it every single day. And I have a 95-pound dog, and recent years, I walk him to the quarry almost every day. And, okay, so I just want to say this is a very special place. It's a treasury. We keep it for us, for our generation and for future generations. Please.
Thank you. Okay. And apologize for butchering your last name there. So I have Kimberly Finale, David Phelps, and then Nomi Harper, and those are the only speaker cards here before we go to Zoom.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners and City staff. I'm speaking this evening as a private citizen. None of the prior requests made by the Planning Commission have been addressed this evening. But besides that, it's common knowledge that the City of Pacifica's code enforcement is complaint-driven and that the City of Pacifica is ill-equipped to enforce existing codes due to staffing shortages. So I ask, who is going to enforce Bayland Soil LLC's eventual violations? I wonder if Mr. William Gulmartin here, not the one that's serving a prison sentence for admitting to a 6-year conspiracy to bribe former San Francisco public officials to get a lucrative contract, will he be self-reporting his own company's potential violations of Pacifica's local codes? So, I seriously doubt it. The question is, who will be held accountable when potential contaminants from foreign soil begin to penetrate the groundwater? Who will be held accountable when that potentially contaminated sediment reaches the ocean and begins to kill off our recovering sea star population and other native species? Who will be held accountable when non-native species are introduced to our coastline due to imported foreign soil from unknown locations? Who will be held accountable when walking to the beach becomes a health hazard because we, your residents, are choking on diesel exhaust? My last question, I'll skip the others that I had, will be, my last question is not who will be held accountable, but who will hold them accountable? Or maybe it won't matter because the damage will already be done.
Thank you, Kimberly. All right, David followed by Nomi, and that's the last speaker card I have.
I'm not sure if it's my turn. Nomi Harper.
It's David Phelps' turn, but since he is not here, we will go to you and then offer him another chance.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm not prepared to say what is in my heart. I'm just going to tell you I don't trust these people. I don't think any of us here trust these people. I don't think anyone here is thinking about the small roads in our community and what is going to happen if there is a need for an emergency vehicle, an ambulance, a fire truck, and then these trucks that they're going to propose to come down our roads every 15 minutes for 4 years are going to clog up a small community's roads. What happens when we need emergency services? This is absolutely not acceptable. And we don't like this. We want our quarry, we want our land to look beautiful, and I think we should absolutely respect that this is native land. It should go back to them, to the native indigenous people. I want you to really consider how beautiful Pacifica is and how it attracts people because it's so beautiful. And I want to keep it that way. I raised my 2 sons here. I've lived here over 30 years, and I want to keep it beautiful. It's one of the last treasures. Please, don't consider this.
Thank you, Nomi. Is David Phelps still here? David? Okay. Do we have raised hands on Zoom?
We currently have 1 raised hand on Zoom.
Okay. And reminder to dial *9 if you've dialed in by phone.
All right, our first raised hand is Carlisle Ann Young. You may unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. Well, I live in Moss Beach, so I'm not a Pacifica resident. However, I'm still concerned about this. My house is 8.7 miles south of the project, a 22-minute drive through a tunnel to get home from San Francisco, as do many of the 25,000 Mid-Coast residents who must travel through Pacifica to reach the scenic portion of the Pacific Coast Highway, as well as points south beyond Half Moon Bay. And this is a road for tourists, which brings me to discuss my concerns about the many projected truckloads bearing imported soil and fill of unspecified origin. Number one is traffic. I want to plead with the owner to not have fully loaded heavy trucks attempt to turn into the quarry mid-block from Highway 1, as they will have to slow down too much to make the turn into an unimproved road, and that'll cause undue traffic delays. Please only enter and leave the quarry via the traffic signal at Reina Del Mar Avenue using a military convoy approach as was suggested. Please also consider trucking your soil or fill in during non-commute hours. And my second thought is about the suspicion. I imagine that you are hearing public suspicion about the imported soil because the San Francisco project at Hunters Point Naval Shipyards that was tested by Tetra Tech.
Okay.
And later those tests were revealed to have been fake. So please allow the soil to be tested first for dangerous chemicals, including forever chemicals.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
PFAS and
We're at time, so we'll keep moving on. Do we have other raised hands?
Our next raised hand is Summer Lee. Summer, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, Summer.
Hi there, it's Summer Lee, and sorry, Commissioners, there's no timer on the Zoom, so we can't tell how long we're going. To not repeat other comments tonight in the fact that this is unceded Ramaytush land, I just want to emphasize that in the public record, there are two mortal shots fired off the bow. One is a legal letter from the Ohlone Ramaytush spelling out the legal deficiencies of the FEIR in evaluating the impact on tribal resources. Another is from an expert, Richard Grissetti, spelling out the EIR's failure to account for the impact on air quality. And now we have a piecemeal CEQA violation. There is a room full of people here, and many times more outside, who will be happy to fund these lawsuits to the bitter end. This means that the city is legally at risk when approving this landfill. There is past talk of protecting the city from the risk of being sued by developers, but if this absurd project ends up in front of a judge, it is a no-brainer that this project loses, and so does the city and all of us. I hope that the Commission and the city attorneys act to protect Pacifican tax money in a city where we're constantly reminded how broke we are.
30 seconds.
And reject this landfill, which is now a development by extortion plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Summer. All right, do we have any other callers on Zoom?
Our next raised hand is Sherry Chan. Sherry, you may unmute yourself.
Hi there, my name is Sherry Chan. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Sherry.
Awesome. Okay. To ensure that I have, thank you also for your service and happy Bike Month, by the way. I actually noticed that Pacifica actually placed their bike to work day or bike to anywhere day at this very intersection. So I found that really interesting, since that's considered that the city would also consider this such an important and vital corridor for transportation and safe transportation for our community. Two issues that I haven't heard so far tonight have to do with congestion and duration. What I haven't heard is that this proposal brings about an acceptable level of congestion at this Reina Del Mar intersection. We all understand that. The city has bought the applicant's argument that the city cannot consider congestion and a terrible level of service, LOS, at the Reina Del Mar intersection. This isn't even true. There's a state law passed in 2017, SB 743, and that only prohibits the use of LOS as a metric to analyze transportation impacts under
30
CEQA.
seconds.
The city can still analyze this congestion under the general plan. Specifically at 515, it says that State Route currently operates at an unacceptable level of service during the AM peak hour. So to be consistent with your own general plan that we just passed, this should be rejected. And we also, the city, there is no limit on the duration of these impacts. So thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Next raised hand.
Our last raised hand at this time is Stephen Gooddale. Stephen, you may unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hold on one sec. Thank you. Technical problems. Almost there. Okay, here we go. Thanks for your patience. You cannot bury the spirit of the land. The Temigtok people lived, loved, and cared for this land over many generations and thousands of years. Satellite map overlays of the Nelson Shell Mound map shows shell mounds above the quarry parcel, and archaeologists agree that the Temigtok was in Rockaway Beach along Calera Creek. Ignoring the people who live here in Pacifica and love Pacifica will not work. Denying the Tamigtalk heritage and connection to the land is abhorrent, and attempting to bury it under thousands of dump trucks crawling along on Highway 1 is sacrilege. You can do better and we can do better together. Let's envision a better, brighter, and more just future. The indigenous California coast. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next raised hand at this time is Cassie Leonardi. Cassie, you may mute yourself.
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi there. Thank you for your time this evening. My name is Cassie Leonardi. I'll keep this short. I grew up in Pacifica. I went to school at Valimar. Honestly, my heart breaks for the kids at Valimar that will be exposed to toxic dust and diesel fuel. I have long enjoyed the Quarry space. I spent my childhood enjoying that space. I still enjoy it as an adult. And frankly, there's nothing wrong with the Quarry as it is. And I find it offensive that people who don't live here in our community are coming and telling us what we need to do with our land and what's wrong with it. That about sums up my feeling on it. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And our next raised hand is Leslie. Leslie, you may unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. As a young resident in Pacifica or younger, 28 years old, have lived here my whole life. My parents born and raised here, grandparents moved here in the 50s after all four of them had gotten married in San Francisco. So this place is very special to me and my family. And it has been so educational hearing all of the public comments about how everyone feels. The only education I had about this project was a video that was made by a resident, which was extremely educational and shocking in what was being proposed. And I really just want to give my support to everyone who spoke tonight for the public. As a young person, it is really great to hear the perspectives and the pushback and just how kind of strong the community is on this.
Thank you.
There are no more raised hands.
Okay. So with that, we will close the public comment period. I'm sorry, but I believe, I don't think that we can reopen for I think what we can do is we've heard a lot of feedback, and as a commission, now that the public hearing is closed, this commission can re-ask some of the questions that we heard, and this commission will also be deliberating. So I think, I heard a lot of different things, and I will open up to my fellow commissioners, but one of the things that I heard a lot at this meeting that I haven't heard at the past meetings is that there's confusion at this point. What's been presented is confusing, and I think that it is confusing when the number keeps changing. I've said this. So I think maybe one thing that we can talk about in our deliberation is maybe trying to figure out how we get some clarity moving forward. So with that, I will open it up to my fellow commissioners for either additional questions or deliberation on what we want to see. I'm assuming, and this is a question for staff, but I'm assuming that since this is a study session and we aren't being tasked with making a decision, and our questions that we did ask at the last meeting were not really the topic of this study session, what is it that is helpful for us to deliberate on so that we can fulfill our process?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think given the number of issues, right, many of which sort of on the more technical side are probably more appropriate for the public hearing on the actual permit aspect of this, I think one objective that's important for staff for the study session tonight is getting a clear sense from the commission if this approach related to understanding perhaps less fill might be considered and approved potentially now in anticipation that a specific planning process would follow in the near term after the reclamation process or permitting process is completed is an approach that the Commission is supportive of with the anticipation that it might enable further reductions in fill imported to the site as opposed to simply recognizing a higher fill reclamation proposal as has already been submitted without really a direct contemplation of follow-on planning for future development, recognizing sort of the two ends of that spectrum of economic use for the property owner. So really that approach to supporting a specific planning process as potentially a mechanism to get to lesser import fill.
Okay. Would anyone like to start? Commissioner Godwin.
Yeah, when I've worked on engineering projects, frequently the first step we did on something we called a feasibility study, where we took like 1% of the effort we expected the project to do and came up with a high-level outline of what to do. I think before we look seriously about the reclamation plan, I think we need at least a feasibility study level look at the development plan. And maybe some simple steps like I suggested, and I've not done any earth moving, so possibly the 70,000 cubic yard cut as a first step is a bad first step. I'm willing to choose something else, but I'd like to see us proceed along like 3 tracks. Okay, we basically want some sort of reclamation plan considered. We want some very high-level study of what the development plan is, and the contractor or applicant needs to do something pretty quickly and show they're successful at doing this, especially if we're using a firm with a limited track record like Balin Soil. So without all 3 of those elements, I'm pretty depressed about going forward.
Okay. Would anyone else like to add some color? Commissioner Bradfield?
I'll just jump in. The obligation to reclaim is undeniable. It absolutely, by law, has to be done, and it should have been done, again, I believe the law states within a year that the owner, after closing a quarry, needs to reclaim or submit a reclamation plan within that time frame. And again, that's closed in 86, 87, something like that. That's a while. And here we are. It's undeniable that it needs to be done. The issue is how to do that. I know there's a huge, I think it's absolutely clear that zero fill is what everyone wants. That, to me, again, I've stated, this was a quarry for, just think of the 20th century of how much material was removed from that site. How do you reclaim something? How do you restore something? You dig a hole, you can't undig it. It's dug. So in order to bring that back to get within SMAR regulations, I think it's very difficult, again, to remine it as cut and fill. That's a significant amount of, and again, I pointed in the report, I believe it said, if that was which is no longer on the table, but that was right around 807,000 cubic yards of cut and fill on the property to reclaim that without import soil. So we're talking, the numbers are almost identical to what the original number was. And I'm absolutely for a very reduced fill number. But in my view, it would be extremely difficult to not import soil. And again, we're all absolutely want to bring that down to the lowest number we can possibly do. And again, in conjunction with a specific plan, I think that is a solid way to move this forward. But regardless, the reclamation must be done. So that's the goal, is to figure that out. So where are we at on that?
I appreciate everyone's time who has spent hours with us here. I think we've gotten so much great feedback from the community, which in past public hearings has helped us kind of develop our desires for this site. So I honestly, truly think we couldn't move forward any direction without the community's support. And I also appreciate the entire applicant team and the owner being here throughout this as well. I want to circle back to something that Director Murdoch mentioned earlier that I think is the chief concern that I have holistically with this project is, to what Commissioner Redfield said, it's undeniable that we understand the state requires the quarry to be reclaimed. I am concerned because it sounds like this is a process that the state could take in their own hands and bypass the city process if, for whatever reason, which I think we have come up with so many ideas on testing for soil to avoid contaminants entering our city. The traffic concerns, there's so many things that the applicant is willing to work with us on that it just takes time to make progress towards it. But what I truly do not think is in anyone's best interest here is if Pacifica effectively loses control of this site, which I really don't want to happen. So with that, I, of course, want the least amount of imported fill for this development. I am in favor of reviewing a specific plan process tied to the reclamation plan, similar to what I said earlier. I see them tied together in order to get the most reduction in imported fill and just a more thoughtful plan. I have quite a few technical items that I think are not suitable for this meeting, but I'm looking forward to discussing them in the future.
Yeah, and having the materials to discuss them will be helpful. Anyone else want to go?
Yeah, look, I think none of us are excited about what's in front of us and how to, it feels like there's a large gap between what the community wants and what is kind of, I think, environmentally reasonable and what's being proposed. We'd all like to see the lowest fill, that especially imported fill. That's just a given. Anywhere that can be reduced, I think it's understood that concessions have to be made on all sides. I'm missing the sense of urgency for a reclamation that was due to be done in 1987 and now has to be done tomorrow, but we'll let that slide. I guess a handful of things that I'd really like to see addressed in some kind of EIR adjustment before I felt comfortable approving something like this would be, there seems to be a large gap in the understanding of the reclamation being required by law, and then we're only affecting certain parts of the slopes, and how you can have to repair one side of the slope and not the other side of the slope, both of which were affected by the same mining operation. I'm not sure I understand that. I'd like to see some more language put to that in a forthcoming proposal. The archaeological resources feel pretty undeniable. I mean, I've looked at a lot of public comment and a lot of certified letters that spell out in pretty good detail where and what these things are. To have them basically completely ignored in the existing EIR as it is, it feels like I couldn't ignore that. And then we've talked back and forth over and over again about testing, whether it's biological testing or heavy metals testing, all these kind of things. And I'm concerned about the city's ability to conduct a third-party audit of that. Just not something we're in the business of. And then, like I said to start, reduced import anywhere. We can find a way to agree on that. Happy to work with any kind of conditions we need to make. I can't see any sort of path forward that doesn't include some kind of, appreciable schedule and phasing plan that shows how this is going to be done. Otherwise, I think you just end up at a situation where the city could be left with some kind of an environmental catastrophe from a defunct development, which has happened time and time again here in Pacifica, or we could end up, putting the cart before the horse and putting in too much fill and then having to move it around again, which just adds, more diesel, more environmental impact, all the things we've already discussed here tonight.
Thank you. Commissioner Wright, and then I'll jump in.
I have a few observations. I'd like to start by recognizing all the people that wrote in. In addition to the people that have spoken out, there was a large number of people from the public that wrote in and had input. And I want to let them know that I read them, I hear them, and it's appreciated. I'm thankful that we have a community, that people are engaged, active, passionate, and care about their community. At the same time, I too recognize that a reclamation is required. It is a matter of law. My preference would be to see a no imported fill option. That would be my preference. Before tonight, I wasn't really very mobile on that point. Tonight, I am willing to consider a small amount of imported fill with proper testing. But I need to see how much that needs to be in conjunction with what is the end use, so we know exactly how much fill needs to be brought in. And I do think that there may be an engineering possibility of doing a lesser imported fill option. And I'm not totally satisfied that this plan is that. There are a number of other issues that I wrote down from all the public comment, but everybody heard them. I don't think I need to reiterate them. There were a number of themes that were brought back again and again and again. I think that the tenor and the tone has changed somewhat with the owner actually showing up and getting a chance to meet you and hear some of what it is that you have to say and what some of your ideas are. I would love to hear what some of your ideas are about what is the highest and best use, what is the end use that you envision for this property. Is that something that's compatible with what the community wants? I would love to have the opportunity to have that discussion in conjunction with how much fill are we going to have. I appreciate how much work staff has put into it already. I think we have a foundation, which I hope we can move forward on something. In its current form, I think we have a little more work to do, I guess would be the way I would leave it. And I think I better stop there for a bit. I may want to add more later if more stuff comes to mind. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I don't think my views are going to be a surprise. The question came up about how many people have, gotten injured or died at the quarry. That would be good information to know when we come back. I will say, I am not the athletic person that's like climbing up the hills. I'm the one that's on the flat paved path behind breakers. When this project came before us, I got my Gatorade and my Basset Hound, who also has short little legs like me, and we walked up the hill. And she catches sense and is dragging me off to the side, and it is scary. She almost pulled me off a cliff. There are safety concerns. The quarry undoubtedly has to be reclaimed. I think the definition of reclamation is so important. I don't think importing foreign soil is the way to create a safe piece of land that's compliant with SMARA. I, as we've talked about, am in a very in a business that effectuates land. I'm also in development, but I think as developers, we have a higher responsibility. There's an ethos that comes with that, right? Because once you develop land, especially if you put housing on or whatever it is, it's going to be that for a very long time. And so I fully subscribe to this like visionary idea, or not idea, but this visionary process of like engaging the community, working together and coming up with a plan that we can all feel proud of as community members and as developers, right? I think that an import solution, not a no-fill solution, the quarry clearly needs fill, but a foreign soil solution doesn't really comport with that ethos. And I think you've heard it from the community. I think at the study session, it's the first time we felt very able to have this as a more conversational component. And I've heard, what I'm synthesizing and hearing is that every person up here is open to working through a community process on a specific plan for development. But no one is jumping for joy over the idea of importing fill. And again, it is so hard to pivot on a business plan, especially when you've been working on it for so long. But I really hope that we can find common ground, because we really appreciate you. And we know that, it takes effort, and it's not our effort, it's your effort. And so I appreciate your time, and that's kind of where I'm standing.
Do you think it would be helpful to the owner for us each to state what we think the maximum amount of imported fill would be, or should we just leave that alone?
If you have an idea, I think, if you have a number, you should state it. My number is 0.
That's where I was when I walked in. My number was 0.
Oh, guys, please, I know, and I'm sorry that we only had 90 seconds for everyone, but I appreciate that you got fresh commissioners for the discussion.
Without engineering details, I have a hard time understanding what is possible. And I think that would be a good place for me to start. If I was presented with a 0 imported fill, I would not have a problem with it. With supporting documentation from an engineer that I could trust, that was mandated with a is it possible to do a no imported fill option? And if they were to say no, it takes 10,000 yards. That seems like a no-brainer. I know from the plan in the 90s that that is possible. And I have a hard time reconciling that. So I am open. I'm not sold.
Okay.
As far as my number, if I had a random number, it'd be around 250. That is based on what we've seen in the reports for years. That's gone from 1 million, essentially. That is a quarter, which is still one heck of a lot of dirt, import dirt. But that's, again, not seeing an engineering plan per se of the, laid out with that reduced fill and what could possibly go in on that. But that's a quarter. That's a quarter of the trucks. That's a quarter of the time. That's a quarter all the way around. That's still a significant amount, but based on what the original thoughts were and even the old plans were significant. It's basically a quarter of that. So that's my number.
Well, without a feasibility level engineering study of what can be done in terms of a development plan, it's hard to come up with a number. But I think from a traffic point of view and a community acceptance point of view, if you're getting much over 150,000 cubic yards, it's very difficult to explain that to the community that that's necessary. And you need to be real clear where those yards are going, why they're required, not just some general number like we need 874,000 to fill in the quarry. I mean, there's lots of possible alternatives than to just pile dirt in the quarry, I think. And, you know, if you're down in some range like that, somewhere in the 150,000 cubic yard range, I think we can maybe as a community get behind that. Much more than that, you better have a great vision of this development plan of why we want to be excited about doing more.
Oh, my turn. Look, I respect the expertise of the engineers here. I can't tell you a number and tell you it's workable because it's not my area of expertise. I've looked at the previous plans, and we don't get that much time to look at these things. I think a factor of it for me is not just the total amount of fill, although that's a big part of it, but also the time which it's going to take to put this much fill. Having this kind of operation here for 4 years is much worse than having it here for 1 year. I'd like to see that. That's why I would like to see partly this phasing plan. You have to appreciate that the impact on the community is greater for the amount of time that you're forced to do this. I don't know that I believe, having looked at all the drawings and the elevations, that a zero cut and fill plan is possible, a zero import plan is possible or even tenable. I don't know that it's better for the community in terms of pollution and noise and whatever, but you've kind of heard the community's consent that zero is what all of our goal is, right? So if we come with a thoughtful approach, I will rely on your experts and your engineers to come up with a plan that presents something like that. I'd be in line to support something like what my colleagues have said, but I don't think it's my place to tell you a goal number and tell you if you get there that we'll approve it, right? It's about a thoughtful plan that balances all these things.
I don't think I could have said it better than Commissioner Ferguson. I too can't put a number to this, and I think we're all striving for zero import. But I think what's more important, no, let me rephrase that, because what's extremely important is that this is done thoughtfully, and I don't want to assign a number and then that becomes the new goal. I'd rather have this multifaceted situation be fully thought through.
Okay. Well, I think unless staff has questions, I think we've fully kind of explored. Give Commissioner Wright the last stand, and then we're going to close the item.
There's one more little piece out there. I think a lot of the concern about traffic, I mean, it's not lost on any of us. We drive on these roads every single day. But I remember back when I first started on the commission, I saw a list of grades. And the specific intersection we're talking about at Randa Del Mar has an F grade. It's the worst traffic grade possible. And we have it right there. And I think that's a lot of the reason that people are so sensitive to it. And I just think if you don't live here, you don't know that. And I think it's important to say that out loud for everybody to hear it so that they know that we're not just throwing confetti up in the air or spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks. It is a real issue. That was it.
Yeah, I'd just like to, one more time, I didn't get a chance earlier to thank the applicant for being here. I know that you've put a tremendous amount of effort into this, and I understand that you have a tough task and challenge before you, especially with the community position being where it is. I'd also like to really thank all the people that take the time to write in. We only get these things typically 3 or 4 days before we have to deliberate on them, and I work 50 to 70 hours a week and have 3 small kids, so 70 sets of eyes is a lot better than 7, so I get a lot of thoughtful research done by the community, and we really appreciate that kind of other perspectives and research that you guys do, so thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on. We don't need to do anything. We're not taking action. We're just close item 3. Okay. All right. Moving on to define the agenda. Probably commission communications, but let's see. Anyone have a commission communication? Okay, moving on. Commissioner Berman.
Sorry, I don't have anything prepared, but next month, June, is Pride Month, and there's going to be a Pride Festival, similar to the past 2 years. There's a parade. The Jeep Unicorn will be in the parade again, and I believe it's June 1st. I'm sorry if that's not the actual date, but Pride Festival is coming to Pacifica.
Thank you. All right, moving on to staff communications. Director Murdoch.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to announce that in relation to the housing element general plan amendment, rezoning, and objective development standards program, the city will be hosting a scoping meeting for the environmental impact report that we're preparing Wednesday, May 22nd at 6 p.m. It is a Zoom meeting. It's an online teleconference. The link to that Zoom for computer or dial-in participation is on the environmental documents page of the Planning Department website.
All right. With that, does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Let's vote. We are adjourned.